did you go to school?
And who's your daddy?
What do you think of what's going on right now, mate?
These evil little invisible parasites.
Satan-worshipping Freemason moron.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
We're not run by factions.
Get the fuck out of camera!
There are much more powerful international forces in play.
Is this pink guy? Is this what pink guy is? I don't fucking know what's happening.
Please go outside and look at the moon quickly.
It's been crazy, guys, but guess what? It's how it is, mate.
Mate, because I want to do you slowly.
But I ain't spending any time on it.
Welcome to Some Dare Call It the Conditional Release Program, where we look at the disinformation disaster artists that have created the absolute fuckstorm that we see today. While the pandemic was an excellent chance for a great reset, as Klaus Schwab would say, it was also an excellent chance to do a great reset on people's brains. And fuck me, did they do that well. So if you listen to the podcast, you're well aware of what this means and probably finding it very difficult to reconcile. But we are going to unpack that idea today with Neil Sanders over here, who is one of the few people I can think of who seems to have a good grip on what the fuck is really going on. And I'm getting a little conspiratorial here. What's really going on? So, hey, Neil, thanks for joining us, man.
No, thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
It's pleasure. So, I had Brent on a while ago, and we talked about being sort of former conspiracy theorists, and that was cool. But I think I've got you here to speak as current conspiracy theorists, because I think that we are not necessarily former conspiracy theorists insofar as we still believe there's a conspiracy. It is just one which is a little different to the one that people know of as a general rule. That basically that there are ultra elites, mostly aligned with fossil fuels, but also just hyper-capitalists. Like Peter Thiel's not like a fossil fuel guy. He's just a hyper-capitalist. But he's also an absolute architect of disinformation and nightmarish concepts which become normalized through vast networks of think tanks and media outlets. Mm-hmm. This is the thing I think that we see eye to eye on, the fact that hyper-capitalists have basically taken the alternative media and turned it into something that pushes their agenda while, and God, this hurts me, they talk about how bad the elites are. For fuck's sake. It's painful to watch.
It's quite clever, though, actually, and it's been a culmination of several things, basically. Like, it's a lot of things that have come from Heritage, the Foundation, think tank, and CMP. Christ, I sound like Alex Jones.
But you sound like Alex Jones in 2002, which is fine, it's different.
And there was a sort of Gamergate was involved, the proliferation of the internet, the sort of way that people can be hijacked through emotion. It's also connected to Fox News, and the way that they portray news and the sort of the techniques that came from sort of the Roger Ailes thought, which also basically ties back to the Tea Party and the John Birch Society, which is a sort of crazy Christian think tank in America, where basically Alex Jones got his start. Like, it's the book Non-Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen, which was one of the sort of first books that spoke about or popularized this theory of a world communist New World Order. Basically, the commies are going to take over the world and turn it into a sort of totalitarian state. And I forget whether that book says that they might happen to be Jewish as well. I think it might.
It does often.
I think it tends to err on that sort of side as well.
Yeah, they do.
This has been coming a long while, to be quite honest. Like, we were talking just before going on air, like, about the sort of the shift in the politics of conspiracy theories. And one of the sort of starkest ones that I saw was Alex Jones, because recently I was listening to. I've got into knowledge fight in a big way. It's cracking.
It's a great podcast.
Yeah, it's fabulous. And in his more recent ones, like, for example, there was one the other day where he went on Stephen Crowder's show, and people phoned up and said, maybe we should make being homosexual illegal. And Alex Jones was like, yeah, pretty much. Like, it's
so much freedom.
Well, his rationale was that it was twofold. So, I don't want to seem like he's like being stupid. Because he's got a justification. One, it's a sin, and then two, he says that basically, if you look at every civilization throughout history, once sort of decadence, which he equates with homosexuality, comes in, that civilization falls. And it's like, A, I don't think that's true, and B, can you think of any civilization that hasn't fallen?
Yeah.
Isn't
America's
that sort of the point of civilizations, that they rise and fall and whatnot? But it used to be very sort of anti-authoritarian, anti-police state. I mean, his first films were police state America and stuff like that. And like, let's say, listening back to sort of old episodes through Knowledge Fight, he's concerned about police overstepping the mark, DUI stops turning into sort of like checkpoints, and putting
DNA
things in
harvesting or something.
all of this sort of things, like and the shift to nowadays, where basically he's very, very pro police, and he's gone from the concept of the New World Order is basically this police state that uses the mechanism of the police to spread its sort of totalitarian lies. Even like through his 9/11 documentaries and stuff like that, he's talking about the police and the corrupt political system and Skull and Bones and stuff like that. Now, for some whatever reason, he's shifted to there are certain people within politics that you can trust because they have the right values, which happen to be sort of very, very right-wing Christian. Some might even say fascist ideals.
They hate the gays enough.
Yeah, exactly. And now that the mechanism of the New World Order is gay people, trans people, immigrants, and general sort of foreigners and decadents and stuff like that. And so it's gone from blaming the system to blaming people, but using those people as a sort of like, oh, they're a tool of the system. These poor sods don't know what they're doing. Just by existing, these trans people are going to bring down society. And it's like, no, that's not true. And B, that's ridiculous. Like, and do you know how you can stop that as well? By just not being a complete bigot. If that is society's the New World Order's plot, I'm going to undermine the world by having trans people exist. If I don't care, it's not undermined the world, has it?
Absolutely. Okay. Like that is massively one of the parts of this that really gives me the shits, because I think it's always implied the Jews are behind this. But basically, by normalizing trans people and encouraging transition and things like that, what we're doing is we are making society into a sort of degenerate form, which will then lead to the downfall. But the link between the web degenerating society, which obviously fundamentally disagree with, but let's just go with it, and then the downfall of society, I'm not sure where that happens. Like, is that because we've got too many sissy men and we can't have a military? What? Because like 0.1% of the population decide to transition, that we're no longer going to be able to shoot people of a different color? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, there's just no basis, and it's really dumb. But of course, no one ever accused this of being smart.
Well, I mean, this is true, but again, it comes from two. It's annoying in a couple of ways, because basically it's doing the thing that the conspiracy world told people not to do, not to be tricked by the media. Like, you remember when it was sort of 9/11 and stuff like that? Don't fall for the media's demonization of Islam. People who happen to be Muslim are just the same as you and I, because basically. Because everybody is, obviously, and the media are going to use this as a demon, as a boogeyman, so that all the attention is drawn to them, rather than the way that the system is creating.
Because we
all
always
these
must have an
things.
enemy, and the enemy was the Muslims. And what was next? We're always, what's going to be next after this? But that was the thing. It was a scapegoat.
Yeah, but now this is what the conspiracy movement are doing themselves, and they're echoing fascist rhetoric. Like, I mean, yes, it's coming from people like Trump and Braverman as well. They're talking about the poisoning of the blood of the country. But there's several things that are explicitly fascist that are coming across in the conspiracy world at the minute. One is basically the hierarchies of people, this idea that, we'll tolerate the gays, but we don't like the trans and stuff like that. It's like, well, that's despicable, because basically you're almost creating like an apartheid system of who is worthy to be a people. And you know what the next step of that is? It's eugenics.
Yes, it is.
Like this is the point. You have to justify being your existence. And then the other thing that is particularly fascist, there's two others. One is this rise of the Superman, this concept of Trump as Rambo, or hard men created by hard times and stuff like that. And which is the irony of that is it's this masculinity is just incredibly homoerotic.
Absolutely.
which none of them seem to sort of like see the irony of that.
No,
but also this concept of the world, or countries or ideas as like an organism and a sort of a pure organism, and the idea that either sort of like the introduction of woke mind virus or the introduction of too many foreigners of fighting age essentially sort of like degenerates that, or sort of like in some way sort of makes the organism ill.
Yes,
and
it breaks a cycle.
And these are explicitly fascist ideas that are being very, very sort of like taken up by, and the irony of this is that it's taken up by very, very right-wing businessmen and politicians, and then the conspiracy crowd, who for some reason think that these right-wing politicians and businessmen and hyper-capitalists are in some way anti-establishment.
Yeah, and also their mates like to have their best interests at heart, which is completely insane. Like someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene could not give a left-handed fuck about you and your family trying to make mortgage repayments. Genuinely doesn't register on any of her radars, and that's fine.
They're so self-serving, and it's so
totally
apparent
self-serving
that they're so self-serving.
I just don't know why you'd support that. It's fine to do that insofar as I believe in a general sense of freedom. I also believe that someone like that should never be elected because you would never look at that and think that's a good idea. But of course, once you see the cultural aspect of things, you don't think about the fact that she is a self-serving, basically just sort of vulture. That is very much obscured by the fact that she's, on your side with all the hot button issues that gets her banned from social media networks. I mean, like, that's not a virtue. Shit.
It's horrible, right? And particularly in the internet, because obviously you got the disconnect of sort of getting vicariously through the screen and stuff like that. But the reason that people like her and Boba and even Trump are popular is because it's empowering to be an arsehole.
Yes.
It makes you feel good to shit on other people and to feel superior. And if you can get that through any way, there's a whole, like, we're going back to this obnoxious Twitch streamer type stuff at the minute. There's a load of sort of personalities that they'll fizzle out. They'll have their 15 minutes of fame, but their entire personality is being as obnoxious as possible. And everything in your brain says, like, why on earth would anybody want to watch these people? But they do. Because basically it's a vicarious thrill. I get to do this. And this is why things like fascism and racism and sexism are appealing. Because if you feel powerless, then you'll be able to grasp any type of power from that. Just by basically knowing that you are racially or genetically superior to an entire portion of the country. Which obviously isn't true. Or the world even.
The world. Right? Billions of people.
Precisely.
Billions.
It puts you on the winning team. It gives you at least something so that your brain goes, at least I'm not them.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Ironically,
you're also an incel.
At the same time, basically, everybody's doing this whole oppression Olympics. And this is, we're so oppressed and we're so, like, this concept of, like, the poor straight white male, when will he get a chance?
I know. Like, it's cool. It's wild. And this is the thing that, it does have that sort of paradox of being you're one of the wealthiest and most empowered people, but yet you are the perennial victim. But like when it comes to subgroups like incels and like the sort of downtrodden white working class and stuff like that, I do feel sympathy for them. I do find sometimes the left discard that, and the idea that someone who's working 40 hours a week at a service station in a Midwestern country in the state in the US should somehow be thanking his lucky stars for his situation because he's so white and so privileged. And I can see why they get disaffected. And then you have someone else lending them a hand saying basically, well, look, I understand your struggle because basically women have taken your promotion because who's your manager? Oh, it's probably a woman, isn't it? And I tell you what, you would be able to get ahead in life if it wasn't for that fact that even if you got that degree, some black guy would take your job anyway, so why bother? And then you turn around and you do the bidding of these people who are literally designing the system to stop you from getting ahead because the one thing they need is that store you work for, which is a part of a 450 store chain, needs to make sure that you never bargain for your conditions, that you never yearn for more because your low wages build their mansions.
Yeah, totally.
It's fucking torture.
I'll tell you one of the best examples that's come out of that recently is through the COVID inquiry. Okay. Now, as you
the Bridget one?
Yeah, the British one.
Oh,
Like there was
the
fabulous...
Bridgen one. Wasn't it Bridgen
Oh,
that started
no,
that?
Bridgen basically what Bridgen did was he hired a room next to Parliament,
Oh,
and he
okay.
got a load of fucking like idiots.
Malone
like
was in there.
Malone and
Kirsch was
like
in there.
yeah, that bloke whose legs grew back was in there.
What?
There's a guy, he's a con man. He pretends to be a doctor or a scientist or something. And one of his previous grifts was that he'd lost his legs.
Yeah, okay.
Now, obviously, the internet never forgets, and like he's got legs. And like,
Brilliant.
This amazes me. Like the level of like fuckery that some people go, like that Shiva guy who genuinely his thing is like, I invented email. It's like, you didn't invent.
You didn't
email.
though.
Like,
No, you didn't.
The most cursory check finds out that you didn't invent email. Like,
Yeah.
and the fact that you would pretend to do that, like that's your achievement in life.
The internet kind of does forget, though. You know, like they do get past these things so easily.
Well, yeah. This is true actually. Like, it's
so like Al Gore got shat on that as well. You know, he said like, I sort of helped create the internet with budgetary things, and he got taken out of context and say that he did sort of create the internet. So I think there is like a boy who cried wolf mindset in there that we've got a bit of wiggle room. But no, Al Gore helped fund the internet. Dr. Shiva said he invented email. He did not invent email. He is a liar. Al Gore said something that people took out of context. Shiva literally lied. Anyway, there was a massive distraction. It's just that I'm not too across what's happening in the UK at the moment. I've been very distracted recently. And I saw there was a pandemic thing and I thought it was Bridgen.
No, Bridgen's just like... Bridgen is...
an idiot.
A good example of he's totally an idiot, but a good example of basically like how far the conspiracy world has come. Because this guy is a corrupt politician. He's done his career as a politician because he lied about lobbying, and basically
that's right.
he's now got absolutely no reputation. And sooner or later he's going to be ousted as an MP because basically like he's useless.
Done.
So what he's done is he's gone, shit, what can I do? I've got these lemons. Let's try and make lemonade. He noticed the demographic of conspiracy theorists and basically looked at idiots like Piers Corbyn and all these twats.
Exactly.
And basically he's done exactly what Russell Brand and what Lawrence Fox and what GB News and what all these other people have. They've identified a marketable demographic and gone, if I say vaccines are bad, George Soros, something, then people will go, oh my God, you're on our side. You're so wise. You know the score. Can I send you some money? And that's exactly what Andrew Bridgen has done, basically. But in the UK, there's been an inquiry into the way that the government handled COVID.
An actual one.
Yeah, a proper one. And I don't think it's legally binding, but the long and short of it is that basically they're discovering that the UK government ignored the scientists that were advising them. They got a whole different set of scientists in who basically like talk shite because they were financed by donors to the Conservative Party.
Yep.
Now, this is going to sound ridiculous because it is ridiculous, but
it is.
The long and short of it is they waited to lock down and then they didn't lock down properly and they avoided all the measures that they should have done. Do you know for why? Right, okay, I'd put it that it was the oil industry because the anti-lockdown protests in America, for example, were actually arranged by the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation has got absolutely no interest in helping workers at all. So basically, they just wanted to get people back to work.
But oil went negative.
Well, oil did go negative, and that was part of it. But in the UK, one of the things that has come out that I think it was the Daily Mail or it might have been Murdoch, I forget. But basically, the reason that the Tory donors opposed the lockdown and this influenced the government policy was because they said, if people aren't going to work and they aren't community to work, they're not going to be buying newspapers. They'll only be going online to read the news, and that harms our revenue. So people were sacrificed in the UK so that people would buy newspapers. That is a genuine conspiracy. We've got evidence for it. We know the people involved in it. We understand the motivation, and it resulted in the death of people. But we're not interested in that. We're interested in a fucking fantasy where the phone system killed people, or doctors and nurses killed people, or viruses don't exist because we're twats that can't cope with reality, basically. And it's sad. Like... David Icke nicked an idea from Thomas Cowan right at the beginning of the pandemic and basically, it's the phone system. And he's pretending that he never said this now. But what he was a bit slippery even at the time. What he said was that basically COVID doesn't exist, and miraculously, the symptoms that COVID seems to cause are also symptoms of radiation poisoning, which can be caused by 5G, because although it doesn't penetrate the skin is the biggest organ on the body, and so it gets into you like that. That was exactly what he said, because I was working with him at the time, and when that's bollocks, that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
it is.
Yeah, of course it is. Like, you know, as I said, like the 5G will kill us all was basically like a reworking of the 4G will kill us all, which was basically, you know, a reimagining of 3G will kill us all, which was a sort of reworking of 2G will kill us all, which was basically a sort of copy or crib of 1G will kill us all, which was basically mobile phones will kill us all, which was tetramass, which will kill us all, which is X-rays, which will kill us all, which is like, this has been going on every time they introduce a new product or system, somehow it's going to kill us all, basically.
I have the same thing with microwaves. I have the same thing with 3G. I was very skeptical of these things. I've got to a certain point in my life where I'm starting to think that maybe it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
it's probably going to be fine.
I dated someone for a bit who worked in this field of electromagnetic fields and things like that. And one day I was with her and I was just like, okay, is there anything? And she's like, nah. I'm like, okay, but like, is there going to be anything? Nah. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take your word for it because you study this. And then as this sort of things went on, I was like, do you get like, oh, you worry about getting threats? It's like, yep. And then later on I contacted her, I hadn't seen her for a while. I'm just like, okay, now 5G, you're getting threats. It's like, yeah, I'm getting threats. And you're like, fuck's sake. Because she goes on TV and says, no, 5G is nothing to worry about. And then people get on there and go, you're a murderer. You're a part of the New World Order. Yeah,
absolutely. But again, this is the stupid thing, isn't it? And going back to COVID, basically, by promoting this idea of 5G and by ignoring the fact that there was government malpractice, essentially, that caused the death of people because they got to stick to their narrative.
Yeah.
The conspiracy world has actually helped the government cover up all these deaths.
Massively. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. The best thing the best evidence that is helping the government avoid responsibility for essentially allowing hundreds of thousands of people to die is this stupid contingent that go, they didn't die from that because COVID doesn't exist. It's like
died of,
it's ridiculous. Like, And,
it's very different in the UK though. Like in Australia, we had a very effective lockdown, being an island with excellent border controls for starters, because we're terrified of fruit from Jakarta or something. So like, you know, we know how to lock our shit down. And essentially we had zero COVID for most of the pandemic. We had more or less zero COVID until the vaccines came out. And then we basically had the vaccine roll out, and then we went, okay, cool, let's just do this and see what happens. But in that meantime, there were issues. And one of the funny things is, I had a few things. Apparently, Mark Wahlberg coming into Northern Beaches. I heard this. I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but apparently he coming into spruik his Wahlburger for the a certain cinema chain run by a guy named Raymond Starker. I'm not going to get out of that rabbit hole. But basically, he apparently brought COVID to the Northern Beaches, which resulted in Northern Beaches missing Christmas. But that's allegedly. That is just a fairy tale. I'm not sure. Do not sue Marky Mark. I know your lawyers are on fucking speed dial. But when it comes down to the way in which the Australian response was, it was very effective, and it made it very confusing because a lot of the culture wars we import. So we had all this sort of conspiracy nonsense going on where people lost their minds, but people didn't quite know how to. Whereas over in the UK, I think you guys had a lot more of a sharper idea of what to do. And I think in the US, they had it pretty well honed. In Australia, we had such effective lockdowns that at one point, one of the least favourite politicians in the sort of cooker world, Dan Andrews in Victoria, he presided as such over aged care deaths that I think was about 800 aged care deaths as a result of some COVID going through some aged care facilities and the whole thing. Now, we can talk about federalism and the way in which aged care is a federal government responsibility, but we're also not going to talk about that. The main thing is you had a whole bunch of anti-lockdown people calling him a murderer and saying he murdered 800 people who literally wanted COVID to be everywhere and didn't think it was real. And you're just like, I don't know what to do with you.
Well, this is the point, the mental gymnastics that have to, and this is entirely why in the UK, idiots started doing the midazolam thing, which was actually stolen. Again, this is what gets me. Like, the more you go into conspiracies, you realise that basically everybody steals each other's theories. It was first promoted by this bloke called Paul Palinko, and he's a sort of crazed sort of Christian bloke that doesn't think that pretty much any sort of end of life care should happen. Like he's lied in court. He's just basically, what he noticed was that we bought a load of these sedatives, right? Okay. And then what he also noticed was that in some executions, these sedatives are used as part of the process in America. Now, and that was it. That's his evidence. We've bought a load of this sedative. Now, there's two reasons why we bought this sedative. One, we couldn't get a different sedative, so we sort of doubled up on this one. And two, we knew a load of people were going to be going on to ventilators and end-of-life care, and this drug is used for both of them. Now, everybody basically picked up on the idea that it's used in executions. Do a bit of digging, you find out that basically in the states where they do use it, they don't think it's a good idea. That drug doesn't kill you. That drug sedates you whilst the other drug kills you. However, here's the irony. What they've found in some cases is that the midazolam actually reacts with the thing that kills you and stops it from killing you.
Oh, and that's probably what some of these botched executions in the States.
No, precisely. That's exactly what it is. And so a lot of people are like, this isn't an effective tool to be used in that way. Yeah. Which begs the question, if you're planning there's several questions. If you're planning a mass murder campaign, right? Okay.
It falls short in a few ways.
Yeah. Why would you use an ineffective drug? Right, okay, you wouldn't. You've got all sorts of things. But the main question that doesn't seem to get asked, because there's no sensible answer to this, is, all right, my neighbour Carol works at a hospital, right, okay, she also at a care home, right? During the COVID, 20 people in her care home died. So am I to believe that she did that? She was persuaded by her bosses, for whatever reason, to, let's not fuck about, murder a load of patients that she spent her life looking after. This is a vocation. She's gone into that field because she wants to care for people. She works with these people. These people live in this residential thing. Some of these people are her friends, right? Some of these people she's known for years and has built up relationships with. But according to the conspiracy crowd, her boss came in one day and went, Carol, you've got to kill Jean and Charlotte today. Yep. And she went, yeah, all right, no worries. There's no way I can possibly fight back against this because I've been told to do this by my boss. Fuck off. Where's the whistle blows? Where's the people with PTSD because they've been forced to murder their friends? Why did not one of these people go, no, I'm not doing that? Yeah. Right? Or clock what was happening. I'll tell you for why. Because the whole thing is bullshit. And the reason they had to come up with that stupid theory was because people were dying of COVID. And they didn't have the balls or the principles to go, shit, I was wrong. They went, I'll double down. There's no way that I was wrong. There must be some other reason why all these people are dying. And it's like, well, what about all the people?
And often the vaccine.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Later, it becomes the vaccine. Initially, they're like, shit, we need something. It's obviously doctors and nurses killing people. It's like, what? Yeah. Everywhere. Where's the evidence of this? Where's the evidence that en masse, the whole planet decided to go, all right, we need to implement Operation Night Nurse, or whatever they call it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the problem with this, the evidence thing, is that there is evidence and there's not, because the evidence is a gish gallop of nonsense, usually on a sort of Twitter blue account that has no character limit, because God, those threads are difficult to read otherwise. And it's just basically I saw one recently today. It was just full of links of nonsense, and I'm like, I'm not going to look at that. No, but if I wanted to agree with it, I could within 45 seconds. And that's the thing. So I find I totally agree that there is no evidence, but we're at a certain point where there is such a cottage industry of underlings underneath this thing. Of bullshit, yeah, exactly. Because when you look at it, right, so if we peel this back, we've got some pretty easy to sort of distinguish puppet masters and the whole sort of thing, with your Mercers, with your sort of Turning Point USAs, with your basic media outlets and organizers and weaponizers of bullshit. You've got your Bannon, who's definitely a master of the art, and also, like you say, with Gamergate, Bannon saw Gamergate happen and absolutely weaponized it. Somehow 4chan became useful, and goddamn did they. How bizarre, because look at QAnon and all that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's just mental.
The Donald and stuff like that.
Stuff like that. I mean, they've managed to really sort of mobilize these sort of troops to basically flood the zone with shit, of course.
Yeah, precisely, yeah.
And then, you sort of stretch into this thing of these interests, these sort of moneyed interests have found this ability to just shepherd these people into their beliefs, but do it under a guise of something else. And then they have this amazing ability of doing like also almost like a multi-level marketing scheme of a downline of people who will do it for scraps. So you've got some girl in Florida named fucking Freedom Patriot 69 who's making $1,000 a week on Patreon because she says the right things at the right time, most of which she's getting from the scraps left on the table by people like Tucker Carlson, people like you know, fucking Steven Crowder, people like Charlie Kirk's network of underlings, just this entire right-wing media ecosystem, and it sort of becomes sort of self-sustaining in that regard, which is very tricky to get around because, like I say, when it comes to the idea of like there is no evidence, there should be no evidence, but what did Patriot fucking dickhead 69 say last week? I mean, it's a gish gallop of stuff you can't control anymore. Like the cat's kind of out of the bag. What the fuck do you do with that?
There's nothing, and like it is problematic. Like there was an example the other day. I was watching these two people argue about the effectiveness of masks, and somebody put up this article and said, "Here you go. Here's 70 peer-reviewed studies that show that masks don't work." And it was all connected to this one article. And somebody had gone into it and read it. It says, you know, the first article. It recommends masks. You've not even bothered to like. This doesn't even say the thing that you said it says.
Oh man, that's the fucking most infuriating thing because you look at these things and you're like, but you had to read it. You had to spend 15 minutes finding out why they were wrong. It took them 3 seconds to post the article. Brandolini's law, man.
Yeah, but all they'll do is they'll either ignore that or they'll go, no, it isn't. You don't understand the paper. It's like it fucking says it here.
Exactly.
Like it literally.
It says in the abstract.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Or. This is the other thing that happens is they'll just pivot onto something slightly different. All right, well, what about this? And it's like, but the problem is, right? Okay, if we think of your like belief structure as like a table, we've taken 2 of the legs off already, and you're still insisting that it's a table because it's got 2 legs.
Fucking cognitive dissonance, man.
And I'm pretty sure that those legs are going to be bollocks as well.
Yeah.
Like, and that was the thing that again. Pissed me off and got me out of the sort of conspiracy world. And it started with climate change, right? Yeah. And I'll tell you exactly for why. Because everyone started jumping on Greta Thunberg, right? Okay, and everybody started jumping on Greta Thunberg. And I was like 2 things. One, fuck you, I think she's punk rock. I like her, right?
I'm
Bollocks. She's upsetting the right people, okay? And that is fine, like that, okay? Yeah. And what everybody was saying was, this ugly little fetal alcohol syndrome bitch, they've just put her out there because you can't insult a little girl without looking pathetic. And it's like, you've just done that.
Oh, yeah, you did.
You've just done it. You've just fucking, like, it's like saying, I can't put my head in that fan. Like, you stupid sod. Like, if that is the mechanism, right, okay, you've literally just, you've just fallen for it. You've literally just fallen for 100%. It. So anyway, absolutely. so I started looking into it, and I got into a bit of a row because this was at the time when like flat Earth was happening, and also all the sort of like Hitler. Maybe we've misapproached Hitler.
Yeah,
like,
Europa probably just came out. And
all of that battle.
I don't
battle
like mentioning the name, but
no, but like but it
is what it is.
It's all terrible shit and like ahistorical nonsense as well.
Exactly.
But anyway, so. The climate change had happened. It was a bit embarrassing actually because what I'd noticed was that people kept putting forward the same people. Like Willie Soon, here's one, right? Basically, what I started looking at was who are these people and what are they saying and who are they to be saying these things? And uniformly, basically, I found out that this person isn't actually qualified. Like, you know, they'll call him a scientist or a doctor or whatever, but he's a geologist. Yeah. And so he's not actually qualified to make the statements. He's not an expert in that field. And then uniformly, they're all financed by the fossil fuel industry. And so I basically said, all right, let's step back and look at this. Okay, it's like, so this person that's telling you that fossil fuels are good, A, he's not qualified to make that statement. B, it's not really his area. He doesn't know. And C, he works for the fossil fuel industry.
Yep.
All of these should be enough red flags. And then the most important thing was that, well, actually, he's wrong. Because if you then go and find somebody who is an expert in that field, they'll explain, oh, no, I see what you've said here, but the actual
but it's wrong
reason
for this
is
reason.
X, Y, and Z. Blah, blah, blah. and I started to notice this, and this is when I became persona non grata, because another person in the industry jumped on this thread and went, I think you've perhaps fallen for propaganda from the green agenda, Neil. And I was like, well, and you need to read my book, because we've gone through blah, 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 blah. And I said two things. One, could it be potentially that rather than me falling for the green agenda, which is a nebulous, not real thing, perhaps you've fallen for propaganda that's come from the highly propaganda savvy and incredibly lucrative oil industry, fossil fuel industry.
The fossil fuel agenda.
And to your point about reading your book, it's your book that we're talking about.
Yes.
I'd gone through the first 5 chapters of his book and pointed out, A, the bloke's wrong, B, the bloke's not qualified, C, the bloke's financed by the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
He didn't realise that, jumped into the argument, and he's not spoken to me since.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much how it's going to play out. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, the fossil fuel industry is behind a lot of this sort of stuff. And it's,
Very
it's
much so.
frustrating to see it. But, like, when you get to a point where people who used to be a part of the green agenda, who used to go to the, hastily
David
organized and cheap, well, yeah, I mean, like, but like, I'm talking like hippies here, right? Like,
Yeah.
people used to go to, like, deforestation protests, who used to protest against, basically fossil fuels and their interest, and mining industry and all that sort of stuff, are now going to protest against wind farms. They're going to protest against renewable energy. They're going to protest in the pocket of fossil fuel. And they're all going there with signs about the fact that everyone's a pedophile. And you start to think, okay, so the fossil fuel industry has now got you saying what they want you to say, but you also come here because you don't like vaccines. Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're actually here because you hate windmills as such. It's because the guy who told you that vaccines were bad, which made
Also
you feel
hates these.
brilliant, also hates these things. Exactly.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, well, hold on. Have you thought maybe there's an interesting link here? Maybe this is something you should, because, if you like connecting dots, maybe there's some dots here you could connect. What do you reckon?
Well, this is it. You're all of a sudden, this think for yourself truth movement has got a party line. And it's like, hang on, I thought that was the complete, like, antithesis of being a truth seeker was that you're not supposed to have a party line. I remember vividly watching Dave Von Kleist get into an argument with somebody about 9/11, and they were all laughing and smiling and stuff like that, despite the fact that they basically disagreed. And there was a couple of raised voices, but that was literally as far as it would go. Now it's like, oh, you're a shell, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I've actually just written an article about this. It should be coming out in Children of the Headache later.
Okay.
But recently, watching David Icke getting completely bent out of shape because other people have stolen his grift. He's pissed off with Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand.
The pool is diluted hard.
Well, they've to an extent. Right, here's the thing, right? Okay, and this is what I say in the article, right? Okay, to an extent, he's right. Okay, he's absolutely right, because basically, they've pitched his shtick, they've pinched his buzzwords and his idea of this hidden cabal.
They've stolen his McDonald's.
Yeah. They're not doing lizards and they're not saying Jews like he does, but basically it's the same shit.
Formula.
Right,
yeah.
Right, okay. But it's ironic in two ways. One, because as we said earlier, basically all conspiracy, or most of it, is pinched, right? His main thing at the minute, Sabbatian Frankists, he didn't come up with that. That's from a book from 1974 by an obscure bloke called Rabbi Entelman that nobody's heard of. And there's no evidence for it either. It's bollocks. It's utter bollocks. All these Rothschild stuff, it either comes from the idea that the Rothschilds, at the Battle of Waterloo, that never happened. That's from the Satan
that's exhausted.
pamphlet.
Yeah,
but they preach this as fact, and so it's ironic that he's getting bent out of shape for people pinching his stuff, because he essentially pinches other people's stuff.
Yes,
as most people do. But also,
of course.
He's pandered to this, right? Okay, he panders to fucking Holocaust denial and protocols of Elders of Zion, and he's interviewed Tony Robinson, and he's entertained this free speech stuff, and he does the whole, I don't care who I speak to, I'll speak to anyone. Fuck off! You're giving a platform for Nazis, right? And it's never cool to give a platform for Nazis. I don't give a shit what you think. Oh, we're just interested to hear what Tommy Robinson's got to say.
No,
Why?
there's a line.
The man is a prick.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Why would anyone give a shit what this bloke's got to say? Oh,
Yeah.
Katie Hopkins has got a refreshing take on it. No, she
Dick.
fucking hasn't. She's
Yeah.
like, she's a pound shop Ann Coulter. She's shite.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely dreadful. She's like a Carry-On version. Like, she's just really like by which the Carry-On films. Like, she's like,
yeah.
she's like a
I think
fucking
even like
character
an
from On
airline.
the Buses. Oh yeah. This, but again, so A, you pinch stuff, and B, you pander to these people, and you lie down with fucking dogs, you wake up with fleas. You were the one saying, "Oh, Russell Brand's actually kind of wise" and stuff like that, and then it turns out that A, he's a rapist, and B, that he's been taking the piss out of you because of the reptiles thing, like promoting this concept of that Andrew Tate, like, oh, I don't agree with everything. What, you don't agree with him being a pimp and trafficking minors and stuff like that? Is that the bit you don't agree with? Oh, but he talks about strong men and blah 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 and the need for this, and it's like, fuck off, just fuck off. No, he doesn't. Nothing about what he says is admirable. It's pathetic.
No, it's just toxic nonsense. Brand is an interesting one though. Like, what I will give Brand credit for insofar as that many moons ago when, and I think may have been you, because someone said if you ever liked Brand, you're an idiot, and I thought it might have been you, but like he used to have
Possibly, that's the sort of thing I do say.
And I was like, I think it was either you or someone else, and I was like, oh, well, I used to like him because I did like him.
Yeah, there was a time
because he was a leftist.
Yes, he was, and
very.
Now, I didn't agree with his "don't vote is no point"
that's
sort of crap
stupid.
and stuff like. But there was a period when he was like, he seemed to be feeling out, sort of like, hang on, there's injustice in the world, and I don't like injustice and
the
stuff like
elites
that.
are a bit naughty, and we should talk about that.
But there's no money in that. So basically, what he's done is he's gone the sort of like, you know, there's the shell of that, but it's not. It's outrage fodder, isn't it? Like, this is the point. And I said, like, it all comes from that Fox News model, which is what Roger Ailes introduced, which is you basically introduce a personality and you have them talk about events. So Russell Brand, like, I'm just thinking, right? Maybe Klaus Schwab, blah blah blah. Or Tucker Carlson, who screws his face up like he's trying to work out 14 divided by 72.
Yeah.
I wonder, right? If it's like, it's such an obvious, like, I'm just questioning things. But basically, they'll just introduce stuff, and every topic is, have you heard of this existential threat that's going to change your life? There's nothing that you can do about it.
They're called Jews.
Yeah, well, often, there is that. But this is the point. And the reason that it works is because people like to get angry. You get angry, it gives you a buzz of dopamine, essentially.
I think that was somewhat like, you know, secondary to Roger Ailes' sort of intention as such. I think Roger Ailes initially had this idea of, I'm going to make a news network that doesn't fuck around, doesn't compromise, and is going to push conservative ideals. And then when they did this and they made this air of commentary and they created this new style of delivering news, I think the audience did the job for him, which is basically just go, I love this. I can't turn it off. I'm going to have this in the background of my house all day long, because every now and then, just like when I'm watching Test cricket and a wicket happens and I go, ooh, when someone says something inflammatory, my dick gets a little hard, and I really like how it makes me feel. But I think Roger Ailes was a genius, but an accidental one.
Oh, do you think? Right?
I think it was architect. I think it was one of those things where he did this because he thought it was going to do something, and it did something else, and it was beyond anyone's belief.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So it's like his monster's grown out of control, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely, but like in a way that benefits him in a way that he never thought that he could possibly have done. Because what happened was he controlled people.
Well, that's what I was just about to say, actually, because it goes beyond sort of just like, oh, I see what you're saying. So like the initial thought is that'll keep people watching. Exactly. And what he's realised is, shit, the more people watch, the more they become indoctrinated to the point where...
And they're just absolutely addicted. But it was just basic capitalism at first.
Yeah. But now it's political brainwashing, essentially.
And now we own a certain thing where Rupert Murdoch can walk into a room, just like he does in the UK because of all the tabloids he owns, walk into a room full of congressmen and they all look at him. You know, that sort of thing.
Or to go back to our original point, you can phone up the government, or contact the government through. I don't think Rupert Murdoch. Hello, but hello. Somebody phoned up the government, and then somehow, because Rupert Murdoch didn't want to have a drop in daily newspaper sales, that affects the government response to a pandemic.
I would be scared of Rupert Murdoch or any of his underlings in news if I were in government, and that is one thing. It's it's very scary, and these sort of things when it comes to stuff like Roger Ailes, stuff like that. I do believe that News Limited does a lot of good journalism in a lot of the newspapers around the place. I also think that there is definitely a lot of C-suite fuckery going on where someone calls up and says, "I'm a manager from News. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Because if you don't, well, we have plans." And a lot of it comes down to money, but influence is money as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And this is the thing as well, when people look at the sort of like, you supposed sort of rebels, anti-establishment and stuff like that, you Lawrence Foxes and you Russell Brands and stuff like that. It'd be very interesting to see where some of the money is coming from or where it's going to.
Absolutely.
Like
to see the balance sheet of some of these guys would just be fascinating.
I mean, the obvious one, obviously, is like, your Coke Industries, Turning Point UK, Turning Point USA and stuff like that.
Yep.
John Mappin, for example, who's the head of Turning Point UK, he's the guy who's got the Camelot Castle in the UK, in Cornwall, and he's the person that seems to be sort of throwing money at sort of lower level people like Piers Corbyn and
keeping him going.
Hind. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Piers
GB
Corbyn
News,
wouldn't live well. He's gross.
No, yeah, God,
he'd be eating very badly.
Yeah, I can't. I imagine his house is very pleasant. Like, but this is the thing again. They're coming from this sort of big business. The irony of GB News. Do you get GB News?
No, we don't. But I know about it to a certain extent, and I must say, GB News. It's on the radar. I think it's gonna. Its tentacles will come here.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it's just losing money hand over fist. Because
is it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because like it can't attract. It's very, very poor.
It's niche.
As in production values and stuff like that. It's totally right wing propaganda.
The funders are interesting.
It's Legatum. Now, this is my point, right? Okay,
we talk about Legatum with what's the AEC forum, IRC forum.
Yeah, which is the
They're
one
the
that
ones
Jordan
who fund
Peterson is
the
connected
Jordan Peterson
to.
thing. But Jordan Peterson's just a mascot for it.
Absolutely.
It's Legatum who's doing it.
Yeah, quite. And Legatum is financed through various sort of like nodes by Coke Industries, essentially.
Well, yeah, Legatum being a Dubai-based venture fund.
Now, that's the sort of thing that would usually raise our sort of hackles and basically go, okay,
yes,
maybe this is the sort of thing that can't be trusted. But it's been embraced by the conspiracy world because, again, apparently they're contrarian anti-establishment. Again, they're just basically telling you exactly what you want to hear.
There is nothing more punk rock than a Dubai shady venture capital firm funding a news network, right?
But do you know the guy that actually owns it, or is the CEO? His name's Sir Paul Marshall, right? Do you know where
I don't know, but yeah.
Do you know where his hedge fund got its start?
Oh God, what?
He got a loan from George Soros. Now, I don't care about that.
That is a comic book thing.
But this is the point, right? That should be the thing that sets all the the conspiracy crowd off. But again, the conspiracy crowd, the do your own research crowd, often don't do that deep research.
They don't give a fuck.
No, this is the thing. So again, the irony is that GB News, whilst it sets itself up to be this sort of alternative to say the Beeb or whatever, and
the elites, right?
Yeah, which is fucking stupid as well. But yeah,
Dubai investment money's not elites. I mean,
really? This is the point. It is the opposite of what it claims to be. But also this idea that the BBC is this great big sort of woke left wing organisation. It's like,
if only.
In what fucking world? Do you know? They've had the most used guest on Question Time, which is a sort of political debate thing, is Nigel Farage, who doesn't even have a fucking political party. Why are we giving again platforms to these terrible, terrible people?
I find that hard. Yeah.
Well, what gets me is people go, "Oh, they're so woke." The BBC. It's like, what? Sorry, why is it woke? There's a black actor on it. Sorry, what? And that's literally it. Part of the time it is that basically they've got this horrific thing about rewriting history and like telling you the truth that actually black people existed prior to 1955. Like, quite.
So we have the same thing with the ABC here, which is the government broadcaster. And it's really painful because they can't step a foot right, because what happens is you have this intense right-wing scrutiny basically saying they're a leftist output, basically propaganda machine, where you can't be like that if you're the neutral government broadcaster. So we had a situation where a memo was sent around the ABC basically saying you must give equal time to the no and yes votes on the Indigenous voice constitutional amendment, the referendum.
Oh, yeah.
Which was victim of a massive misinformation campaign or disinformation campaign, which recently a guy named Dr. Jeremy Walker did a paper about the fact the Atlas Network was involved in it. And there was actual sort of filthy money in it. If you look at Advance Australia, which is the sort of like the right-wing communications organisation was behind a lot of the No campaign, they clearly have some Yanks on board because their disinformation game is fucking A grade at the moment. But you had the most awkward things where I'll listen to ABC radio every now and then, and they would have someone on and they would have to say this awkward thing of like, yes, but don't you think that there should be a concern about Indigenous recognition and the voice to Parliament? And you're like, it is so embarrassing. You feel like you have to say that. You can have a story on whatever you want, but you bring someone on there who's going to talk about something beautiful about this opportunity to change our country for the better, but you have to shit on it because you've been told to by management. And yet we have all these fuckheads on the No campaign and the just general Cook sphere saying, the ABC is just fucking so biased. They're pushing the yes vote. It's all part of the agenda. There's Jews involved. And you're like, do you listen to the ABC, though? Because it's really hard to listen to because you fuckers have made it insufferable because a memo has gone out from management to ruin the fucking content. Now everything has to be double-checked by your bullshit fucking way of seeing things. So frustrating. I hated it. That's glad that reference was over.
Yeah, there's sort of... We've got to be fair. So basically... If we give credence to, if we give time to some sort of sensible
give it to both
ideas,
parties.
We've got to give the stupid people a platform as well. It's like
exactly
you really don't actually.
No, you don't.
You don't.
And they've got plenty of platforms. They've got their own fucking platforms. I don't care if it's government funded or whatever. If you have to pander to insanity, then something is broken. Where does it stop?
Because
where's the fucking line?
Are we going to start to have flat earthers on the news? Because basically, got
to be balanced.
Exactly, this is the point. But again, that's been weaponized. That has been totally weaponized by the far right, basically. It's
the Jews that are doing that one too. Flat Earth is totally. It's a Jewish conspiracy, which is I find very funny because I always thought you watch the Netflix documentary and you sort of see into it, and it's just this sort of cute thing. But I think it was on a podcast called Yena Passaran. Almost certain it was with someone who came on there was a bit of a flat earth expert and just sort of broke it down to the fact that the flat earth thing, that's a Jewish conspiracy. It's
what?
It boils down to anti-Semitism. The Jews are ones who are keeping the flat earth away from us.
Oh, right. Okay. To hide the fact
the
that
Jews
we are connected to God. Right.
I'm not even sure. I can't remember what the thing was. And, I don't have a note on hand. But basically the whole thing is the Jews are the ones who have NASA, who have all these guys making sure we don't know the Earth is flat.
Oh, yeah. Werner von Braun, that famous Jewish NASA guy. Right. Okay. So let me just sort of, because it's dumb. But hang on. So that would mean that the whole Jewish faith, they know they're wrong, because the idea of flat Earth is that basically the Earth is flat. It's in a dome. We're the only planet because we are basically like the playthings of God. We're God's snow globe or whatever it is.
With the ice wall.
So if Jewish people or the Jewish religion has conspired to make us think that the world is round so that we don't know this, they must know that that's the truth, which means that they also must know that their religion is not the truth. So why are they bothering?
It'd be interesting. We should definitely do more of a deep dive into this because it's one of those things where it just is confounding. But also sometimes I look at these things and think, why am I spending so much time on dumb shit?
Wasting it.
It's just so dumb. It's just so painfully dumb. But it takes away the cuteness of Flat Earth. 'Cause I always find Flat Earth being one of the cuter conspiracies where it's like, it's so dumb and it's so banal. And then you're like, oh, but there's like a whole Nazi
There's
vibe
a whole
to it.
nasty element to it.
Yeah.
Because,
and you're like,
actually, now that you mention it, who's the Dubé guy? He's very anti-Semitic, isn't he? Like, and he's a Holocaust denier and everything, basically.
Okay,
so,
Flat Earther?
Yeah. Oh, no, he's the guy that did the 200 proofs of a spinning, but he's like, he's the Alex Jones or the David Icke of Flat Earth. Now, you know, I always thought in modern Flat Earth, the earliest thing that I saw, and I don't know if this is true because me and Brent were talking about this, like, because it might not have been the first, but anyway, one of the most prominent things that where people were sending around this ex-CIA, ex-NASA guy who basically lays out all the tropes that the UN map is the actual map, etc., etc., etc.
Okay. It's
a bloke called Mark Boylan. He does it at a comedy club. He's introduced at a comedy club by a compere. Right.
Interesting.
It's a comedy show. It's a fucking comedy show. He's playing a character. Now, what happened is basically since then, he now sort of on his socials and stuff like that, he embodies the character. I think he's trolling. I think he did it. But he got picked up and he went, I cannot believe that people, right, fuck this. Like, I'm doing this.
But when do you stop?
Well, I don't think he can stop because I think he's Andy Crawford it basically. Like, but yeah, that like so because we were talking to Dom Johnny about this. He's like, in his book, he's just like, oh, he's assumed that it was a joke on Reddit or something that got out of hand. And I says, I think it was. I think I swear to God, look up Mark Boylan doing it, and he's introduced. The compere even says, we're going to do something a bit different now. This guy is playing a character or something like that so that the audience gets it. And it's like a spoof thing. He's playing like a whistleblower. The fact that the audience is laughing and it says Comedy Lab or whatever behind him. But none of the fucking Flat Earthers have picked up on this. They've gone like, even if they have, they've gone, well, that's the only venue this poor sod could get it out at that. And it's like, oh, fuck off. You've got the entire internet. Like, you could. Have I ever told you my favourite Flat Earth story? This guy that I know, this is what convinced him that the Earth is actually flat.
Okay.
He drove around in the countryside until he found the biggest, flattest field that he could. And then he went and laid down in the middle of it, and he couldn't feel the Earth moving.
Oh, fuck's sake.
I wish that was not true. Like, but that is genuinely how this one particular guy, who won't name, came to the conclusion that it's flat.
It's flat. It might, because I can lay flat on it. So what was the guy's name again? The comedian?
Mark Boylan.
Mark Boylan. Okay, so I was thinking of buddy Jonathan Pye. His real name is Andrew Doyle. But Jonathan Pye, the guy who rants to camera.
Yeah, he's great.
I've seen him live once. Yeah, he's really great. But like, he's also like an interesting thing where it's a character. I think it'd be easy if you're a bit basic to think, okay, this is like Jonathan Pye must be a journalist. I mean, like, obviously, look at the thing.
Yeah, well, that's the shtick, isn't it? Yeah,
great character.
But
he doesn't break character. Like, he does. He does a really great job of it. But it's also one of those things where it's like, I think if you were to walk up to him and say, "Are you Jonathan Pye?" I'd be like, well, I mean, no,
of course not.
What do you mean? I mean, like, this is getting much, you know?
Yeah.
But
no, absolutely. But this is the thing.
Yeah.
But I suspect that this guy basically got a bit of traction off it and went, "Oh, this is brilliant." Like,
may as well take advantage of it.
Well, it's a fabulous practical joke, isn't it? Like, do you know what I mean? This lad basically sort of like rekindled the thing. It's like those birds aren't real guys or whatnot. Like,
yeah, the birds aren't real thing. Fucking hell. I remember there was I think this is a bit of a detour. I won't go too far down it, but I can't remember the guys' names because it's a bit of off the cuff. But they did a thing for Bhopal, like the Dow Chemicals tragedy in India.
Oh yeah.
And they did a thing called Golden Skeletons, where they went to a conference with a golden skeleton and explained how you can turn these tragedies where people die into money-making opportunities. And you had these guys in suits coming up going, man, that was so motivational. I mean, like, we've always looked at these situations as like the thing you'd never want to have. Man, like, you wake up in a cold sweat thinking that Bhopal happened to you. But, man, Bhopal's just an opportunity. Man, like, this is like, there are golden skeletons in there. And you're like, fuck, they did it. They actually did it. It's Golden Skeletons Bhopal will have a there's a video attached. It's great.
Was it the Yes Men?
Yes, it was the Yes Men. Yes, it was.
Oh, yeah.
It was the Yes Men. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed that real break from reality. But I think that sort of satire thing is really tricky now because I find satire quite depressing.
Well, the problem with satire is that you know, this is the thing. This is why I'm debating with this comedian. Yeah. You will, because there's so much now available. You can find somebody that's doing that genuinely with no satire. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, the amount of people that you come across and you go like, "Is this a joke? This is a bloke, this alpha male bloke, Nick Alpha or something on Twitter."
Yeah, okay. So he's ours. He's Nick Adams. He's ours. He's a hard one. So he's actually from where I'm from. And as in Sydney, not Australia as such, he was on a council here where one of his platforms was to basically kill all the pigeons, I believe. He's a very cooked individual, and the idea of whether he's taking this like alpha male thing seriously, I think it's still the jury's kind of out. But when it comes down to it, he is one of those guys that you think he's kidding, and then you find out that he had a platform to just eradicate pigeons from an area, and you're like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
This is the fight. And then you get some other people that started off as satire, like that terrible ginger comedian that started off doing the sort of if meat eaters like acted like vegans and stuff
Tim
like
Minchin
that.
or something like that? Or?
No, not Tim Minchin.
No.
He then took a load. He's got long ginger hair, and then he took a load of steroids and realised that actually.
Fuck me!
You know the guy.
No, JP Sears.
That's JP Sears, right? Okay.
Yeah, he got real pilled.
Yeah, but he used to be funny, and then he took a load of steroids and decided that rather than take the piss out of the wellness community, he was going to become the wellness community.
Yeah, well, he became the conspiracy community. Now he just sits on trans people.
And he's not funny anymore.
The conspirituality guys, I think, do a really good job on him. Mm-hmm. They tear into pieces. Yeah.
Oh, good.
I think there's some others that do as well. He's a real piece of shit, though.
But this is the point. And then there was that Tatiana McGrath's for stuff that started off doing like
which should have been funny.
Yeah. And that shifted because that's where the audience was and just went from basically pointing out wry things about how, like, you know, you can get tied up in this sexual gender politics and stuff to basically just saying that anybody that isn't that questions their sexuality or gender is a maniac. And it's just and again, like, that's the problem, is that with they started off as satire and then sort of just became dreadful people, basically.
It's fucking dark. So, like, I'm going to take you on a bit of a spin, and we're going to look at hypercapitalism.
Ooh.
Because one of the things that I want to bring into this is sort of like a multi-level, multifaceted thing, and this is one of the things I want to pick your brain on. So, looking at something like the World Economic Forum and the Klaus Schwab. Yeah. So, we've got George Soros, right? Open Societies Foundation genuinely does fund things that help BLM, and on the right is like a bogeyman, right?
Yeah.
Now, we have been screaming about people like Bob Mercer and Peter Thiel endlessly into the void, and 7 people know about it. Whereas half the planet knows about how, George Soros, for a good reason. I mean, he was a fucking escaped the Holocaust and was an anti-fascist because he didn't like fascism for fairly good reasons.
Yes.
But we still have the George Soros check as a joke. We don't so much joke about the fact that the Mercer check or the Teal check or the Kirk check or any of these kind of like, Heartland check or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There is a fossil fuel, sure, but also like a hyper-capitalist side to it. Like Peter Thiel's not a fossil fuel guy. He's a hyper-capitalist.
Yeah,
but he's also a billionaire who spends a lot of time campaigning against his sexuality because he's gay, who spends a lot of time pushing climate change denial despite owning a giant island for when the climate emergency does happen near New Zealand. I mean, bro, like, you're hedging your bet, sure, but like, fuck you, because you could hedge your bets better by not pushing ideas that continue the status quo so we all melt. Thanks, Bo. But the thing that I find, like, sort of interesting in the culmination of this, definitely more of a statement than a question, is like, with the Klaus Schwab thing, with the World Economic Forum, the way in which the conspiratorial right demonize the World Economic Forum, who are essentially capitalists, who see things like crisis and want to exploit it. And they see things like artificial intelligence, and they just want to make sure that if they do implement artificial intelligence, they can maximize their profits without destroying the society they're trying to make money from. At no point do I think they're doing this for good reason.
No. or give the appearance of not wanting to destroy it is
Yeah.
more accurate.
Yeah,
Like, they'll
or
still
so
destroy
they can
it.
self-regulate.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
yeah, totally.
So look what we said at the World Economic Forum. Surely we can self-regulate. Look how woke we are. Look how fucking...
Yeah, we're concerned. We're all stakeholders. Like,
We're
you
all
know,
stakeholders.
the community
There's no
that
problem
we put
here.
the community in which we put this facility and factories and stuff like that, we've got to ensure that they're happy as well, so that everybody's happy.
Except
And
they
it's
can't
bullshit.
unionize. We can't let
No.
them unionize. But otherwise, it's fine.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and this is the
exactly.
thing. Like, we draw a line at unionizing, but we also do have a really nice pamphlet about how we're making the whole thing better, which has been organized by the brilliant, benevolent minds at the World Economic Forum. But it seems like a lot of these hyper-capitalist people, like the Peter Thiels, like these Bob Mercers, like these dark forces, are funding these kind of media outlets who are basically pursuing these kind of agendas, and they're doing it in a way that is interesting insofar as you'd think that the World Economic Forum's position was a good one. It's one of compromise. It's one of, don't eat us, we're the benevolent rich. And instead, it's this thing of like, no, fuck them. They're pussies. They need to harden up because we're not going to take this 3/4 approach. No, we want everything. We want every
absolutely.
single scarrot.
Well, I mean, the irony is that basically, regardless of which system that you use, stakeholder or shareholder capitalism, like basically,
It's still fucking capitalism.
Yeah, it's still capitalism, and the person that wins is still the capitalist. Like,
Yes.
so that's the thing. I mean, the WF, right, says that it's interested in this thing called stakeholder capitalism, which basically means that like, you know, we're interested in the effects of business as well. We want the community to be happy because if the community's happy, we can be more profitable.
Everyone should profit.
Yeah, as people like
As
Naomi
such.
Klein and stuff have pointed out, it's like, you know, all these problems that you're trying to solve or giving the appearance of solving, you fucking caused them.
Right,
It was
you
you that
created
did it in
them.
it was you that did it in the
exactly,
first place. And
Yeah.
the World Economic Forum has been basically saying that it will sort out all these problems that it caused ever since it started in the 70s or wherever it started,
exactly.
right? So if it's not done it yet, it's not going to do it, right? Okay.
No, you can't solve the problem because that is basically ending the business model.
But the best way of describing it is looking at it like two different ways. Is The Wire and Gomorrah, right? Okay, so in The Wire, right, there's a load of drug dealers. What they do is think of these as the capitalists. They roll up on the street and they set up on the corner and they violently defend their business. They give a shit about the community. They don't give a shit about their rivals. They're there and they're doing what they're doing and basically just making hardcore money.
Yep.
In Gomorrah, which is set in Italy, the mafia roll up on a housing estate, and they get everybody from the housing estate and have a meeting with them and say, we're going to start selling drugs here, okay, but we're only going to do it over here. And the flip side of that is that we're going to clean up the entire building. We're going to keep crime away from all the rest of you, and basically we're going to give you a bit of money off the back of this as well. So your lives will be improved by us being able to sell drugs at the other end of the street, okay. But the flip side of that is that you're involved. You have to tell the police if the police come or whatever. Now,
you got to say nothing.
On the surface, I'd sooner live in Gomorrah than in The Wire. Because at least you're safe and you're getting benefits. But actually, in both cases, the community's being destroyed and the profits are going straight. And you're being run by drug dealers.
Yeah.
So either way, the drug dealer wins.
Yes.
In fact, you could even make the argument that actually the second way is easier for the drug dealers. It requires that effort up front to give that sheen of giving a shit or whatever. But once you've set that up, as you say, you self-regulate. Because if a resident comes to you and says, I got mugged down the street or whatever, okay, you can either deal with that, keep it in-house, or you can say, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
And if you tell anybody that you did, you're done. Because we regulate this. With the Baltimore thing, at least you can kind of go to the police. So in some sense, that business model is precarious.
It's vulnerable,
and you're open to rivals, which is precisely why the Heartland Institute is demonizing the WEF, because they go, shit, we've got this business model where basically we are open to rivals. Now, we are very strong. We are very powerful, and we are, for to use the same metaphor, feared on the streets. So basically, it's unlikely that a rival will approach us. But you know what's
which one's the one that did that?
That's The Wire. Okay, because
no, which one was the one who like owned the place and just fucking absolutely flattened everyone? What was his name?
Marlowe.
Marlowe. Yeah. So they're Marlowe.
Yeah, so they're Marlowe, absolutely. But Marlowe is basically, you know, he can lose. He can lose. Whereas the WF are the Italian Napoli's mafia, mafia. Basically, they've got the community sewn up. They are in the system, not sort of rogue, sort of operating.
They're not parallel to it.
Yeah. And now again, basically, just to sort of reiterate, in both systems, the drug dealer wins and the community loses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But in the WEF version, it's more palatable to the community, and it's also more palatable to, if you continue the metaphor, politicians, local authorities, and stuff like that. Because
you can be pictured with these people because they're local icons. They're businessmen.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, basically, because there's no trouble, you can turn a blind eye. It's difficult to turn a blind eye to The Wire and Marlowe because there's bodies everywhere, and there's junkies lining up the street, and they're stealing from the local residences to finance that. That's all seemingly under control. In the mafia version, in the WF version, it's not. It's just swept down the road. It's swept to a place where we can't see it. But you know those places where you can't see it. And here's the genius of the business model. So to use this sort of Napoli thing. So all the crime is now down the road in San Fernando or whatever. Okay. So what would be beneficial for the people of San Fernando? To get in touch with the WEF, the Napoli Mafia, and go, come here and sort. Yeah, fix us. Yeah. So it's genius. It's very, very nefarious, and because it sets up these huge sort of capitalist systems as guardians of the community and helpers of the community, and they're not doing that at all. They're basically like, it's problem reaction solution. Here's the fucking irony of it. Okay, is that they create the problem, they get the reaction, and they offer the solution. David Icke missed that. Solution. Yeah, David Icke's missed that by a country mile. He's doing the whole it's Nazi totalitarianism, blah 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 blah,
and making
all this
shit up.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and they want you to eat the bugs and live in pod homes and stuff like that. They don't give a shit.
No, they don't.
They really don't care. Like,
they don't. And the thing with bugs is realistically what bugs are is they're going to use them for things like chicken feed for the most part, because that's what chickens are meant to eat anyway. But you also have this situation where maybe we'll use like bugs for flour and things like that. Sure. But at the end of the day, what the bugs are really about is a few people wanting to sell bugs because A, they're going to make money, and B, the third world are getting hungry and they're starting to expect food. And we're in a situation, Westerners aren't going to eat bugs.
Well,
the third world's developing world's going to eat bugs.
Well, the irony of it is that at present, it is more cost effective to make premium beef than it is to farm crickets.
Yeah, and that won't last forever because the economy of
of course it won't. Like,
but absolutely.
But at the minute, bugs, so to speak, whether they are in, you get some sort of like whey protein for like gym buds and stuff like that, that contains it and stuff like that.
So much more expensive.
Exactly, they're luxury items. They're not. This is the point. The idea is that it's cheap because you see insects everywhere or whatever.
Well, it's cheap because of the New World Order. Basically, it has to be because otherwise, what's the point, right? Has to follow the logic.
But again, this is the thing. It's this existential threat as well, and they kind of tie it with climate change as well. It's like they want you to stop eating beef. Don't you like beef? I do like beef. Would you prefer to eat a scorpion? No, not really. Well, that's what they're going to do. Like, I'm telling you right now, it's scorpions on toast from here on in.
Yeah.
And, but again, it's that existential threat and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, when it boils down to it, like, there would be under no illusions. Whilst we're saying that the WF isn't the sort of New World Order in the same way that the sort of the silly conspiracy theory says, it doesn't mean that they're good guys. No. They're lobbyists. They're as you say, hyper-capitalists. They don't give a shit about normal people. But that's kind of the weird thing about conspiracy theories is that they think that you're being persecuted. The sad reality of it is you're not even on their fucking radar.
No.
Like, they don't know you exist and they don't care that you exist.
They don't care
right?
at all.
They don't want you to live in a pod. They don't want you to eat the bugs. They like when toddlers basically like close their eyes and think the world has gone away. That's what you are to them. Right, okay, you do not exist. They don't give a shit about you. Like on a very base level, they might give a shit in as much as They want to retain their position.
Well, you're a customer.
Yeah. You're a customer and you're an
that's sort of
annoyance
it.
and you're a resource.
Yeah,
like, to
and
a
they'd
degree.
rather keep you
Like,
to an extent. But when it comes down to it, if you stop drinking Bud Light, then you're probably going to drink Busch instead. And that's fine because it's the same company and everything's fine.
Bud Light is actually has had a massive resurgence in its profitability, and so how that's been spun, because if you remember, everybody was going to boycott Bud Light.
They were trying.
You know what was stupid about that? About that Dylan Mulvaney thing, right?
Yeah.
And the way that it was framed, I thought that her face had been put on like cans that were to be sold in the store.
Mm-mm.
They weren't. It was a promotional 4-pack that was sent to
Just
her and
sent
her
to
alone.
her specifically. Yeah, and it was one of those things where, of course, like, you know, I've got a plug with CBCo, right? And I plugged them at the start of the episode, and I sometimes wear their t-shirts for funsies because they sent them to me, no worries. But it's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's just a plug thing. Like they've just sort of said, hey, would you like some free beer because we like your show? And I'm like, yeah. Thanks for liking the show. Here's my address.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that was the thing. But again, because there's a problem with like accepting reality in the conspiracy world, particularly at the moment, that's been spun as that's because we've forced them to go for more wholesome advertising strategies from here on in. And it's like, you didn't force them to do anything because they didn't actually do the thing that you said that they did.
And of course, they don't have to because they own all the brands anyway. Like, chances are the fucking beer you're defecting to is Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah, totally.
And this is the way that these sort of capitalists win because they own everything.
And again, you know, for all the reasons that you could hate a beverage, like, okay, maybe it was deforestation, maybe it was killing union members in South America. No, it's for acknowledging that a trans person exists.
Yeah, and saying, well done. Yeah.
And do you know how incredibly fragile?
Which is fine, because when it comes down to it, it's hard to be that.
What pisses me off about it is that, like, it's so incredibly fragile, and it's framed in this sort of gossamer thin sheen of masculinity, and like, I don't like trans people. It's like, let's be honest. The reason you don't like trans people is because you think that if you acknowledge their existence at some time, you might have to sleep with somebody that happens to be trans, which is never going to happen. No, but that is the paranoia.
Not unless you want it to.
I can't possibly even just acknowledge they exist as a human being without somebody thinking that I might be gay. And it's like, A, so what? That's not a bad thing. It's 2023. And B, it's like, is that literally it? Is that how fragile that you are? That like, oh, he's talking to a trans person. He's clearly a homosexual.
So
why? How does that work? How does that work? It doesn't work at all. It's so. But
even
again,
if you could tell, sometimes it's a situation where I'm sorry, mate, but you can't tell. People can pass. I mean, like, it's this is the thing of the toilets. Like, mate, like,
the toilets is such a stupid thing.
Like, it's infuriating.
What the fuck goes on in these toilets, right? It's like, seriously, like, you know, when I go to a public toilet, it's a fairly sort of like in, out, you know, I don't hang out there sort of like checking out who might be a potential
depends on
suspect.
How pissed I am, how much I talk to other people in the toilet. But at the same time, if I'm sober, I'm right in and out.
I mean, in the UK, the idea that somebody would talk to you in the toilets is just like, people don't talk to each other in queues. I have an American friend, and I was talking.
We are Australian; it's quite different.
Well, this is the thing. Like, you know, I have an American friend, and I was talking about queuing up in the post office to send some letters, and so there's about a few people there, and it's like, what were you chatting about? I says, I beg your pardon. I says, what were you chatting about? To who? To the people in the queue. That's not an English thing. Like, if I turned around to somebody and said, so, how's your day been? They'd look at me like I'd stabbed one of their children. So the idea that this would happen, that transactions go on like this in toilets in the UK, it doesn't happen. I tell a lie. I was once waiting so long for a friend of mine in the public toilets in Nottingham's town centre that a gentleman in a suit walked up to me and asked me if I was working. He thought I was a prostitute. I was about 15 at the time.
I'm sure you were very cute.
yeah, well, I was. Yeah.
Hell, that's very funny. You fancy some business?
yeah, it was. It was pretty much like that. Sorry, excuse me.
Funny.
Like, initially, I thought he thinks I work in. He thinks I'd like mopping up or something like that. Like,
No. That's a different 50 quid. Different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, different. Or maybe 100. I don't know. But I don't know the going rate when it comes to teenagers in Nottingham. But,
in Nottingham. This was this is the 90s, so you'd be a lot more. You'd get a lot more for your money.
You got to adjust it for inflation.
Absolutely. But again, all this, I just don't understand this sort of like, well, I do understand it, but it just makes me sad, all this sort of like hatred towards groups.
It is a pointless distraction, but it distracts us from all the things we've been talking about, which is basically that you've got a ruling class of people who are, generally speaking, taking the piss. They're using political mechanisms to entrench their power. They are making sure that cultural norms stay the same.
Yeah.
And in doing that, what you can do is you can very much do like a Trojan horse of anti-feminist or sort of, anti-progressive action by basically saying, we don't think that this wild thing that doesn't exist should happen. For example, kids shouldn't transition at 8 years old. And you're like, okay, cool, fine. And it's like, so what next? Women voting? But I'm kidding. Yeah. But like, it's that thing. Like, they can easily couch other anti-progressive agendas within these fictitious, absurd things that don't really exist.
Well, this idea that the trans agenda is that sort of older trans people are encouraging other people to become trans so that they can be gay with them. And it's like, who the fuck came up with this paranoid, like, 11-year-old sort of like...
It is an 11-year-old thing,
It's so childish and schoolyard and stuff like that. And it's like, do you really think... this is one of the first things that I fell out with members of the conspiracy crowd. I had a big, long rant with Richard D. Hall, who's the Manchester guy.
Manchester guy, we talked about that extensively.
Yeah. I was on his show, and he was talking about the trans thing. And I says, it's not an agenda. Like... And he's, oh no, it is, Neil. And his sort of take on it was, well, I think it's to make money because, like, obviously, like, people are making money off these
stock
operations
and things like that, right?
But it was even less than that. It wasn't even like he'd not really thought it through. It was just like all these doctors that are doing the things, they're making
big
money.
Pharma somehow, things like that.
Yeah. And it was like,
but no.
How many people do you think transition? Right. Okay. Several things. Right. Okay. What I said was. Right, and this was the only bit that they actually showed because basically they cut the entire sort of debate. I said, I think that people spend far too much time worrying about other people's genitals. Like, who gives a shit? Who gives a solitary shit? I said to him at the time, I was like, do you know any trans people? I know 2. Do you know any? No. What do you give a shit about anyway?
Yeah,
and like,
it's not
and this
part
idea,
of your universe.
Well, it's the idea is that, like, these poor, naive, stupid people will be convinced. And I says, Richard, like, has anything that you've seen from any trans person ever made you think, fuck this, I'm going in the kitchen with a bread knife? Like, no, it hasn't, right? Okay. Right. The people that make that decision to transition, regardless which way or whatever, it's not easy. The idea is that you can walk in and go, Doctor, I saw a pink shirt the other day that I quite liked. Any way that you can turn me into a woman? Like, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, fuck it, we'll do it this afternoon. Like, it's not, you have to go through a huge amount of psychological profiling and stuff like that. Now, so this is the point. Do you think they think that other people are stupid and naive enough to be tricked into this thing? I was like, well, could you be tricked? No, never.
No.
So why do you think everybody else could be?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, because they're not as wise as me. They're not looking at it from the perspective of me. And again, the idea that at some point in the future, someone's going to go, oh, God, I didn't want to be a woman after all. I was tricked by the New World Order for some reason.
But there's like 3 or 4 of them, and they weaponize these people. And like,
are there going to be some people that aren't happy? Right, okay. Yeah, of course.
But they weaponizes the concept. Big time.
Yeah.
The idea of regret is a huge weaponization in the anti-trans community.
Yeah, totally. What about all the people who regret not having it? Because they didn't have the opportunity.
Yep. And now they're not passing and they feel like shit in their own bodies.
Yeah. And you know what? These people that basically, like, a huge amount of depression, a huge amount of suicide and stuff like that. It's like, I'm not surprised. These poor fuckers are living this sort of existence that most of us couldn't even think of, feeling that they're trapped in the wrong body, and then when they want to do something about it to make their life or existence better, they get shit from fucking cunts.
Yeah.
Like, so
there's an entire
of course,
industry on shitting on them.
So is that regret, like, even driven by, even in the sort of 3 or 4 people that they found, is it really actually driven by what you did, or is it driven by an uncaring society that you don't fit into for whatever reason? Right,
It's impossible to think that that doesn't like work hand in hand. I mean, like, you've got someone like Posey Parker who's being clearly paid to do what she does, going around selling T-shirts that say, "Oh, here's a dictionary definition of a woman, and you're not a part of it." And then you're meant to go, "Oh, but why are they so sad?" You're a schoolyard bully, weaponized by money to fuck with these people who are vulnerable. What did you think was going to happen, you psychotic numpty?
And what gets me about it is that they position themselves as it's often done through a sort of veil of Christianity as well. It's like, the fucking hell, like, where in the Bible says that, like, you know, love thy neighbor, unless of course you disagree with their gender politics, like, in which case persecute the shit out of them. Like,
but Christianity's jumped the shark. Jesus, the sandal-wearing socialist, has, you know, sort of spiritually died a long time ago. I find it very difficult to reconcile any of that stuff. I'm not religious. I know Brent is, and bless his heart for being so. But, like, when it comes to me in the sort of, like, you know, do I like Jesus in the sandal-wearing socialist sense? Yeah. I think there's some good lessons there. The Judeo-Christian ethics got some good shit to it. But generally speaking, you know, it is that thing of, like, basically, you know, I think Jesus probably would have shagged trans girl because, let's face it, you know, he was just hanging out, you know, having some time, you know, drinking some wine. Life is pretty good. I don't believe in the sort of, like, you know, the Jesus of the, you know, the Midwest in America that's basically, you know, wants to shoot anyone that comes onto his property.
Gun-toting Jesus.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, and I can't feel that.
Is that Carher Arms still going off? You know, the one that's run by the son of Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and the Trumps were very involved in it, and they have a statue of Jesus that's carrying a gold AK-47.
Of course, that's so disgusting on so many dumb levels.
But again, this concept of and this isn't Christianity, this is an interpretation of Christianity. I think you mentioned C Street earlier as well. You know, the CNP and Douglas Coe and all of those guys and the family. They have the guys that run the prayer breakfast and were connected to Billy Graham and the bloke that did the Moral Majority, the other Jerry Falwell, and all those evangelical Christian types and stuff like that. Their idea of Christianity is so skewed. It's basically,
it's hyper-capitalist.
Well, it's hyper-capitalist, and it's just like, it's just, again, the most childish excuse to just do whatever you want. It's like, we're Christians and we know the word of God, but because we know the word of God, we're special, which means that we're allowed to sin. Which means, and with impunity, and furthermore, nobody is allowed to judge us because you're not God.
Yeah,
and it's like, wow, what an incredible narcissistic setup. But there's a huge amount of people. Yeah. But like all your Kellyanne Conways and your Sarah Huckabees and your Mike Pences and your Mike Flynns, they all like conform to that idea, and then several other people who were sort of connected to the Trump administration as well. This idea that they're beyond reproach. And as Douglas Coe said, that basically, I think that the exact phrase, or paraphrasing what he said, was that, like, well, although God was God to the sheep, he was also God to the wolf. And, you know, you need wolves because otherwise, how can you define a sheep? And like, all the way through this, you're like, basically, like, this is just an excuse to act like a wanker, isn't it?
Yeah, because like I know what a sheep is. I don't need a wolf to eat a sheep to make you realize that
what a sheep is.
It's insane.
No, quite. This is it. But yeah, the interactions that these guys have and stuff like that is, and the power and the lobbying power and influence that they have is astonishing. It's very, very like broad, basically. I don't think it's quite like that in the UK. UK doesn't seem to have that sort of Christian extremism. Although what I have noticed is, like, for example, we've got this twat called Calvin Robinson, who's not really a real vicar.
Okay.
And
great names for a vicar, though.
Yeah.
Calvin,
like,
I mean, you know.
It's ironic because his main thing is about trans people and stuff like that. And personally, I think this guy might be in the closet. So it's like, closeted man that wears a black dress all day, worries about trans people. Oh, the irony.
Hangs out with
Like,
kids, maybe.
Yeah, particularly, yeah, like, you know. So, and then Lawrence Fox is pushing this heavy Christianity and stuff like that at the minute, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, I think it just all ties in. Again, it ties in with the sort of political movements that are behind it, or the ideologies attached to those political movements. I don't think, for example, that Russell Brand is getting a check from the Coctopus or
No.
whatever, or something like
No.
that. But what he's done is he's realised that this ideology, this hate and anger mill, outrage farming and whatnot, there's an audience there, and the reason that audience is there is because they've been primed by the larger corporations to hate these sort of things and stuff like that. And then you sort of like, this is the irony, like Alex Jones, who for years talked about how so-and-so's been used, blah blah blah, weaponized by the deep state against so-and-so. That's what you are now. You are a tool, you're a channel of their hatred, basically. Like, you are a disseminator of their propaganda, and maybe you always was, to be quite honest. But it's so prevalent now that it's just ridiculous.
But that's like the hierarchy of the whole thing, right? So if you look at it, and you've got we were talking about Legatum before, which is that sort of GB News thing, right? And you're saying they're losing money hand over fist. And maybe they are. I think
so, yeah.
And maybe it's worth it. And maybe they're not. And maybe it's worth it. But whatever it is, there is a absolute propaganda objective involved in a group of very, very wealthy people to disseminate a certain line. These GB News epithets will then be disseminated down a path. And this will include things like the Daily Caller with, let's face it, massive heir to a fortune and general fucking Nepo baby Tucker Carlson, who dares call other people elites. They will bring up these sort of talking points, which will then filter down this downline of multi-level media that then spews out these same talking points, maybe with minor differences. And maybe we do the same thing when it comes to hearing thoughts from those who are well established and well distributed in large mainstream media things, and then we add our own little fucking arse degree flair to it and give our own little spin to it and then republish it on our own fucking podcast. But at the same time, there is something a lot more infecting and a lot more devious about the way this sort of works. But you look at these sort of cultish things. I'm not trying to form a cult by basically saying these people are saying cooked and dangerous things. I'm more just trying to shine a light on things. But these people are trying to form a cult. Now, there's parallels, I'm sure, with the UK and the Australian versions of this. But you can see that we have our Sky News Australia, which is basically just weaponizing bullshit and making money from it. Not a huge amount of money, but they've got some presence on YouTube and things like that. Essentially, you've got fairly elite interests creating narratives, which then filter down to bit players. And now you have a decentralized army. Well, it's not decentralized as such because they're all getting their ideas from the same place, but they are still somewhat decentralized down when you get to the base thing where they're swapping ideas and creating ideas. Sleeper cells, and like, but what do you do with these motherfuckers? Like, you guys have this stuff in the UK. You guys have all got your little independent media dickheads. We've got tons of them here. What do we do with these people? Because they're never going to stop. Like, you could kill off the guy and they could go bankrupt, and GB News could be no longer viable. But they would still find a narrative. They would still create their own bullshit, and they would put it on their little YouTube channels with their 20,000 subscribers. But that's 20,000 like mums and dads and uncles and aunties and cousins whose brains are turning to fucking mush, and they're turning up to councils to protest any kind of trans legislation. Like, you know, if you've got a unisex bathroom, they're going to turn up. They're going to harass councillors. Oxfordshire City Council trying to make a fucking workaround for traffic. I mean, you know,
people turn up and say that it's part of this 15-minute WEF New World Order. Yeah, but this is the problem.
What do you fucking do with these people?
It's very difficult because the problem is what these theories and these sort of gatherings and whatnot offer them is like it's like a new lease of life. Let's look at somebody like
community.
But right said Fred. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, quite. Okay. But let's look at them. What they've done is they've become relevant in a very, very sad and tiny way. But they were not relevant. And somehow they've managed to sort of find a way to, be quite popular again. And also there's this sort of circle jerk that goes off and say, oh, you're so clever. No, you're so clever for realizing that I'm so clever. And the problem is that the more you have a go at somebody, and point out that you're an idiot, the more it goes, of course you think that, because you haven't got the special knowledge that I have got.
Exactly.
And it polarizes people and forces people more into their echo chambers. So there's that, and there's the sort of comfort and stuff that it gives people, but also
massive comfort.
Yeah, I mean that was the problem with COVID, was that basically it gave people answers and it stopped. And nobody will admit this, right? But people were terrified, even like maybe not openly, but subconsciously, the brain goes, "I don't know what's going to happen." Right?
If they weren't terrified, they would have invested in stocks.
Yeah.
And they would have made good money too.
Yeah. But they needed to close that loop. Viruses don't exist. You say.
Yeah.
Wicked. Don't need to worry about it anymore. And that's it. And
just got to buy some supplements from the supermarket.
Fucking Roseanne was one. I was watching her dreadful stand-up the other day, and she talks about how masks are stupid and COVID vaccines are stupid and blah, blah, blah. And then she segues into the fact that she's had COVID 4 times and hasn't been able to smell or taste anything for over 6 months.
Amazing. Just amazing. How do you reconcile that?
That's my point. It's like,
how do you live in that brain?
Yeah, I had a friend that basically like on his 3rd COVID, and each time he lost his sense of smell and taste for at least 6 months. I says, well, when are you going to get the vaccine then? Surely, like, he says,
you must be bored of this at this point.
Yeah. I don't need to. I'm naturally immune.
No, you know what? Keep getting it.
You've had it 3 fucking times. Yeah, quite. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so, yeah, this is the thing. Now, when has it worked? Right, okay. It's worked a couple of times, right? Minor Yiannopoulos, right, okay, he was completely deplatformed. And there's 2 ways that it'll happen. One, someone gets completely deplatformed but he was driven to first to GABS and stuff like that. And then I think the last thing that he was doing was on a Christian channel, like a Christian sort of selling ornaments.
He did a big pivot where basically he said that he was no longer gay. His husband was his housemate. I think he was working as a staffer for Marjorie Taylor Greene at some point.
Yes, I think he was. But basically,
and I think he was hawking nonsense on Christian television as well.
He's scrabbling around and dying on his arse. And basically, one of the reasons is, and this is the second reason, is because basically these things are so rigid, and because everybody involved is not on the same team, they're all out for themselves. Sooner or later, they'll start to eat each other. Like, for example, Ali Alexander.
Yeah.
The second they knew that he'd been fucking around with boys and young boys for years. Of course they did. They were friends with him. The second that became public, disavow, and all of this. Right? Yeah. Like Candice Owens and Ben Shapiro have fallen out now because they have different views on Israel. Yeah. She thinks that basically it's one of these things where I agree with Candice Owens. She's not super keen on mass genocide of Palestinians as a response to Hamas atrocities. Ben Shapiro disagrees with her, and they've fallen out.
He's Ben Shapiro.
Michael Yeadon and Robert Malone have fallen out at the minute.
I saw that today.
Yeah, Andrew Kaufman and Judy Mikovits, they fell out. And so when they fall out like that, you have to pick a side, because basically the problem is their bullshit cancels each other out is the problem. So sadly, the only ways that I can think is either massive deplatforming of the person themselves to the point where basically they just can't get their content, or just sitting until the society that they've created sacrifices them because they get bored of them, or they're not extreme enough for them, or the mood has changed, or they remember. Like, I mean, obviously there's a bit of sort of like sway with that, because, for example, your RFK, people are like, the evidence that you lied about Epstein and your fucking first wife died in very, very strange circumstances. Everybody's doing the mental gymnastics to try and explain that away now at the minute. The thing that always got me was about where David Icke was saying stuff like, oh, you can't trust the BBC and you can't trust this. It's like, you've been on the BBC so many times. He's been on like that show with Michael Portillo, who's on Wogan twice. Yeah. Like he's desperate to get on the fucking BBC. He absolutely wants to, because it's the publicity.
Want him.
Now, if you're kind, you could do this. Well, that's why Rage Against the Machine went on Sony, isn't it? Because basically, you need to, I've made an album. I want as many people to see it as possible.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you would go on the BBC. But it's kind of hypocritical when you basically say you can't trust anything that comes from these people, and at the same time, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And as I say, like, you know, he's cross at the minute, obviously, David, because everybody's pinching his stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Despite him doing the same thing to everyone else.
Yeah, quite.
But the pool's also, you know, quite diluted. And like I was saying earlier, like it must be quite tricky for some of these guys who like the money, like the prestige, but find there's a new upstart. We've got one called Maria Z, who's a real shooting star on our scene.
Yeah.
And basically she is doing the Alex Jones model really well. She's she just lies through her teeth, and she just says the most absurd things to camera. She does it in this little room with these crochet little frames behind her. It's the most adorably weird thing. But she sells mRNA-free beef. You know, she sells.
Oh right, yeah.
Fucking just
how the
nonsense.
fuck how she got the mRNA out of the beef?
Yeah, I haven't asked her the question, I'm afraid. I mean, like, it's just that thing. Like, you know, she's just a consummate fucking con artist, and it's incredible to watch. I have a begrudging respect for her, but you've got to have this thing where, so for example, one of the ways she got up is that she got really buddy with Stu Peters.
Yeah.
But Stu Peters has got to start thinking, shit, like Maria Z was like this novelty from Australia who was working out of her mum's bedroom, but now I think she's bought a unit and she's selling a lot more supplements than I am. Fuck, maybe I need to knock her down a peg. And I would be very surprised if Stu Peters, basically a protege, turned around at some point and said that Maria was, you know, a part of a New World or some sort of pedo, because she's just too good. Yeah. I mean, she is a bullshit artist of the highest caliber.
Oh, can't you remember when Alex Jones and David Icke were beefing because, like, he's a turd in the punch bowl. He says all this stuff about CFR and blah, 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 and then he brings up this lizards bullshit and blah, blah, blah. And then Alex pivots to fucking interdimensional demons and meeting God whilst eating a chicken fried steak and stuff like this. And like, so again, they've got no shame. This is the point. But you're absolutely right, because like, and this is why they tend to start eating each other, because they prop each other up, but at the same time, and so to a degree, they're relying on each other for creating the ecosystem.
Yeah,
but because
and
it's
getting
an
a reasonable amount of people on board.
But this is the point. There's only so many people on board, and if your message is similar, as you say, like, you know, these people who are, these people are also on the same team, so to speak. They're also, you know, business rivals, essentially, aren't they?
They are, and that's a really tricky thing, you know. Like, and this is the thing I think, like, you know, when it comes to, like I say, people like Stu Peters and Maria Z, I think eventually they'll have tricky things. But the main thing that they have to do is they have to convince whoever's listening or whoever's around that they are the one who's going to save them. And that's what Alex Jones does so well. Like, you listen to Knowledge Fight. So, like, you know, when it comes to that thing of, like, you know, look, I'm going to go off the air, but if I do, you'll all be dead. But if you buy my supplements, I won't go off the air. No, I will go off the air, but I won't go off the air, but I might not. Okay, buy my supplements, see what happens. And then people
what
do buy
he's
the
doing
supplements.
Though, he's like a sort of sad boyfriend that's like, come back to me, Laura, otherwise I'll throw myself off the building. Like,
it's actually really, that is that really made him just a 16-year-old.
He knows exactly what he's fucking doing, like, with that.
Oh,
like,
absolutely, and it works.
You know,
I mean, like, he's made hundreds of millions of dollars, so, you know,
he's kind of, the thing is though, I think, I don't know, Alex, I wonder if he is getting ready to sort of knock it all on the head and stuff like that, because, like, the problem is, again, he's tried to sort of create proteges and stuff like that, and again, the ego thing. So what happens is either, like, you disagree with somebody like David Knight, and then or Rob Jacobson or something like that, and then because suddenly they become like your enemy, or you've got somebody on like Amin Troyer who basically is your bitch, but isn't making you any money and
can't exist without you. Like, he just can't.
But
it's
he's
like
also
Trevor Noah after Jon Stewart. I mean, sorry, man, I didn't watch.
It's a dilution of it, isn't it? The things that we liked about Alex, we can see in Owen, but he's like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy.
Yeah.
He does the outrage and blah blah blah, but he's just not. He hasn't got the charisma of Alex. Like, that's the thing. And this is the bizarre thing about the sort of, it's not necessarily always information, is it? Or it's the presentation of it. So, and coming up with new stuff, really, as well, because that's the other thing that people don't tend to like to admit, is that a lot of the reason that people are into conspiracies and stuff of any description is the entertainment value. Like,
exactly.
You know, It's a
Yeah.
mystery. And that doesn't necessarily even mean like, your wacky conspiracy theories and stuff like that. People are interested in, people read like Private Eye, Punch,
Yeah.
magazines about sort of like, political intrigues and stuff like that. Fuck, Game of Thrones, etc. That's what people like. People
Yeah.
like plots and stuff like that. And people are shits. So they often plot and conspire with other people to make themselves like wealthy or
The worst
successful
part
or
about this
whatever.
is like, so for example, if I was to push an idea of anti-trans panic because we had a common enemy, and I was pissing down on someone who made me feel like I was more of a, like, as I say, like, I was better than. I could be better than races. I could be better than countries. I could be better than anything. All these sort of generally speaking, empowering things. It's very difficult to empower someone by saying, I think we should all pay more tax, so the people with no opportunities should have a chance in life.
Yeah, but again,
it's not very
this
sexy.
is no, but again, that kind of is like with the criticisms of the lockdowns and stuff like that. Like, okay, everybody kind of like it's down to personal inconvenience. Like, these things offer you personal inconvenience for the greater good. These things offer you like it's all upside. It's all upside. Now, maybe this is detrimental to society as a whole, but
fuck
like,
society. What
fuck
do they do for
society.
you?
I'm interested in me at this
Exactly.
at the moment. Yeah,
yeah,
and that's the sort of. That's sort of the sort of marketing genius of it, is that basically you get something personal out of it.
But how do you counter that?
Well, because it's basically, you can't. Well, I mean, you need to people
you?
to grow the fuck up, because
well,
the problem
that's a big
is.
ask.
Well, absolutely, because again, like, let's say, like, let's take the example of COVID, right? Okay, COVID denial stuff, lockdowns, massive pointers, etc. It's win-win, baby, because basically, like, you get to do what you fucking like to do and act like a petulant child, right? And whinge, but you've framed it in, we're this community, we're actually doing good, we're trying to tell people not to. We're resistant to slavery, because masks equal slavery, or vaccines are deadly, or lockdowns killed more people than the virus. None of which is true, but again, this is the rhetoric that he's built up, because again, that's sort of the point with these things. They're framed in such a way that QAnon or whatever, you're the resistance, you're fighting, you're the tip of the spear, etc.
And you're saving the kids.
Well, let's think about it. How did Brent and I get out of this? Like, well,
I think for different reasons.
Well, yes, for different reasons, but from the opposite ends of it. Basically, Brent saw it in the sort of real world, and I saw it in the sort of behind the scenes, where I'm watching people that, and this was the case for both of us, we saw through the lies. It doesn't take much for that snowball to start, because I'll tell you for why. Because, like, we've had quite a lot of people come with us regarding the sort of podcast and stuff like that, where, I mean, I saw it where basically, like, people were that desperate to put out content that they just put out stuff that they knew wasn't true and stuff that was bullshit, and then did it in the sort of, but I'm
Status
just
quo.
Asking questions and stuff like that. But you're not. You'd really, like,
you're making statements.
And you're leaning into dangerous areas here, right? Okay, there was some that basically started like, well, maybe Holocaust denial, and maybe like this anti-Jew stuff, and maybe this sort of stuff.
Put the brakes on.
Is fine, and and then the other end of it was with Iconic and stuff like that, where they just went, we're pretending that COVID doesn't exist, despite the evidence that I physically put in their hands and the conversations that we had
behind the scenes, right? I mean, that's hard because I think you said before, like, that got you alienated.
That absolutely, but it also made me go, bullshit. I don't want to be involved in this. And with Brent, he saw the sort of, well, hang on, this cloning shit, this crisis actors thing doesn't make any sense, and if Brexit happened, that doesn't make any sense, and if Trump happened, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because if they were elected or not selected, then why didn't Hillary get up? I mean,
yeah, but I suppose it depends what people are getting out of it, isn't it? Because I was trying to think back to when I sort of got into conspiracy theories and stuff like that. Because now, obviously, Brent's been desperately, like, introspective, and he's like, Brent. Like, he's really thought. He's
very much like that.
No, absolutely. But I'm trying to think when I got heavily into conspiracy theories and stuff like that, and it was partly because I just stumbled across some DVDs and things like that.
Yeah,
but I was trying to think back to what, like, I'll put it this way, right? Okay, and this may well be correlation as opposed to causation, but I don't think I was at my happiest at that point in life.
Yeah.
I was looking for something, and I was of the age where I'm not at uni anymore. I'm in the real world. Like, do you know what I mean?
So it was
I can't-
post 9/11.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact,
Okay.
I mean, the thing was, like, I'd always liked UFOs and JFK, Yetis, Loch Ness monster, ghosts, that sort of stuff. Been fascinated by all that sort of stuff. The first sort of like conspiracy thing that I got off my mate Chris. His granddad had sent him he had sent him a presentation. It was Ed Begley Jr. Talking
Jesus.
about 9/11 and how
Yeah,
he
okay.
felt that there was something fishy going on, and then the second DVD was a Dave von Kleist 9/11 in Plain Sight,
Okay.
and that opened the whole thing up to me. And then I discovered InfoWars and stuff like that,
Yeah,
and
okay,
it
yeah.
started. And I was fascinated by it. It was like a hobby. It was like a new hobby, and very, very quickly it became sort of like the only thing that I would talk about. I'm sure my friends would testify that basically
I was like that too.
there was a period where
Insufferable.
absolutely. And I'll tell you why. The first thing that moved me away from it was hanging out with another mate that I'd, for want of a better phrase, pilled. I'd got him into the conspiracy stuff.
I didn't pill anyone. I'm so fucking ashamed of myself now. I didn't even think about that.
I'd shown him
damn it.
Bohemian Grove, and I showed him the 9/11 stuff and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I went round to his house one day. It wasn't even his house. It was a friend's house. We were having a party and whatnot. And he came up to me and just downloaded at me.
Really?
And, just basically like this and this and this and this. Because he was now in that stage. Like, do you know what I mean? Where everything...
You created a monster.
Yes. And I was like, oh, fucking hell. Am I like that?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So
I was a real prick, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to yell at people, basically saying, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
You're part of the problem.
And here's why you're part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure I did something. I think I upset somebody in a nightclub, basically. Like,
at the pub, so many times.
So
people got really pissed off at me. Yeah. And I just didn't care because no one's going to punch me. Fuck them.
No. And also, basically, it's like, at that point, it's like, do you not realise what we're dealing with? I'm trying to tell you about this fucking cabal that's taking over the fucking world and murdering people on the news and stuff like that, and you don't care.
When I say you're part of the problem, how don't you realise that's a real problem? You should be like stoked that I'm telling you this. I'm saving you. Yeah,
precisely. So this is the thing, and again, like, I suppose it very much depends on how deep you go into these things. Because I've also got friends that basically like, I like to watch a documentary about JFK. Oh, I think that 9/11 was a bit fishy, etc., etc., etc. But it doesn't really bother their everyday life or whatnot. Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit of a side thing. I got a mate who thinks the moon landing was fake. It's fine. I'm not worried. I love him. He's great. It's fine.
Yeah. Like, I've changed my mind totally about that. I used to think, totally, absolutely, it's bullshit, complete. Like, and now I'm like, no, I don't think.
Did Buzz Aldrin punch you in the face?
Yeah, that was it. Like,
he does like a punch.
He does, doesn't he? But like,
he's very fisty.
But yeah. So if we're thinking about how to get people out of it, I'm just trying to think how I can apply this logic that what's happened to Brent and I, and see if there's anything. You've got to offer an alternative, I suppose, as well, and you've got to think of the reasons why people are investing in conspiracy theories. So
these are things I believe, and I'll follow up with you in a sec.
Yeah, because so with me, so let's look back at it as me. Like, so I was perhaps a bit unhappy. So what happened where I was going out of it? I was getting happier. If I think about it, I was doing better at work.
Yeah,
I was becoming more confident in myself, etc., etc. Even though certain things had happened, because life happens to everybody and whatnot.
Of course, yeah.
And then sort of like finding the flaws and stuff with it. And I explained this to horribly like humble brag here. Like, I was explaining this to this Swiss journalist the other day.
Oh, yes, yes. Barack Obama.
Because I I'm like, Joel, I get a bit sort of obsessed with shit. And
sure.
That was the thing that I was obsessed with, was the conspiracy theories and finding the things. So I've kind of transferred my obsession to the story behind the story. Now, do you know what I mean? You know how sillily like deep we go with the podcast and stuff like that.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
But in the same way that, like, I understand where that came from now. That gives me the same buzz as the understanding what the Bohemian Grove or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean?
There's still the moment.
Yeah, there's still the R and the discovery and the puzzle and the achievement of it. Okay, and so if people can move into that and use the same mechanism. Like, do you know what I mean? And perhaps be a bit self-aware and go, why is it that this appeals to me? Oh, this appeals to me because it means that I can shit on people. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, why do I want to shit on people? Perhaps I'm not particularly happy. Right, well, let's do a bit of work on me. And again, not for everybody, but a lot of people use the conspiracy stuff as this is going to sound horrible, but as a substitute for achievement or as a way to show that they're actually a nice person.
Yeah,
like
my years between like 16 and 25, and also many of my friends that I don't really speak to much anymore, absolutely personified by that concept.
Also, it's a way to sort of reject society as well. And again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing because society is fucking rubbish, right? Okay,
but yes, but it's often because you can't achieve within it, as opposed to why society is bad. And
that's not necessarily your fault, even, right? No. Okay, because life is massively unfair, and some of the most talented and brilliant people just get the short end of the stick. But if you can create a scenario where you go, yeah, but I don't give a fuck about that because the real world is nothing like that. You're going to 9 to 5. And you're worried about getting your mortgage and doing this. That doesn't appeal to me because I'm fighting Satanists.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. And I'm waiting for the revelation where they're going to finally open up Area 51 because the world is far more wondrous and full of opportunity than it appears to me.
Than your petty bullshit.
Yeah. Quite. Now, whether that pans out is another question.
Well. Regrets. I've got a few.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. There's. I mean, I never quite got to that stage, like where it's like I'm not going to do this because of X or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
did, yeah.
Like, well, I'm now. You know what? Now I've said that, I probably did, but well, I'll tell you one. Nikes. I didn't wear Nikes for years because I had it in my head. Well, it's two reasons. One, because I wanted to be a contrarian and go well, Nike's what everyone wears, so I'm not wearing that. And then I sort of couched it in the sort of, and they have slave.
Yes, I definitely had a thing for that. Yeah, that was my lefty thing for sure.
Brent didn't like it because basically it's the Saturn imagery.
The Saturn thing, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah. But then one day I just went, bollocks, I'm buying myself a pair of Jordans. And I know this sounds shallow, but they made me feel like a fucking prince. There was just something that I'd not allowed myself to do because of my mindset and ideology, was just get something frivolous that is pointless, but for no good reason makes you feel kind of happy. And I had not done that before because I'd avoided it. And it's stupid. It's a pair of fucking shoes. It's stupid, but there was something about that just made me go, you know what? I'm going to be happy for that.
Yeah.
And I know that's shallow, and I get it. And I know that's a really silly, glib example and stuff like that. But you know what? Sometimes you need to just go, oh, bollocks. I don't need the weight of the entire world on me. I can be a bit selfish and a bit sort of shallow and a bit sort of just...
And just participate.
Pleasure-seeking. Yes. Just participate.
I've been a contrarian for music. I've been a contrarian for anything that I thought was too accepted and too mainstream. And eventually I've got to a point where while I still do shun these things, I don't shun them for the same dumb reasons. I shun them because I just don't like them. I still like pop music, but I'm not so aggressive and pointlessly, sort of shitty about it. And I think there's something liberating about that.
Well, the other point is as well, it's like finding out the world isn't as terrifying as people think it is. So like the trans experience as well. Most people that are terrified about trans people have never really met a trans person.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I was used to work at a place, and there was a trans lady there called Emily. She's lovely, absolutely wonderful, and everybody was really like, I don't want to sit next to her. I don't want to sit. It was the same thing. I was like, why don't you want to sit next to her? And no one could answer. And it was
What's the deal? Yeah.
Because you think that if you sit next to her, everyone's going to think that you shagged her, aren't you? Like grow the fuck up.
Yeah, it's childish. It's incredibly childish.
And I sat down, and Emily is the most fabulous person. And the second that I started talking to her, I went, and this might make me sound ignorant. It's not my intention. I immediately went, oh, Emily's a lady, right? Okay, I get it, right? She's a woman, right? It's very difficult to explain her mannerisms, the way that she presented herself, the conversations and stuff like that. And it just is like, oh, I get it. You're a woman. I get it. and she's ace. She's into all sorts of like weird, wacky sci-fi that I enjoy and stuff like that, and like Hitchhikers and Red Dwarf and things
There's
like that.
There's a massive trans nerd crossover I found. Like all the trans girls
totally.
I know are massive dogs.
But this is the thing. But immediately the sort of like was taken away because it's like it's just Emily. It's just Emily. It doesn't matter. And this is the thing. The problem is that a lot of these conspiracies are a lot of far right ideology, a lot of anything that's hateful and stuff that relies on echo chambers and stuff like that. I know it's a bit glib and stuff like that, but it's like the American History X. It's like, I actually hung out with a black person and realised that actually that he's all right. Do you know what I mean?
And then the ending happens, which kind of like, we weren't saying
of course.
Spoiler alert.
But the point being that basically you've kind of got to for want of a better phrase, inoculate yourself to these things in society that you think are terrifying. And the way that you do that is by having a little bit of it, and then, before you go. And everybody's sort of like, the world is changing in a huge way, basically. When I was at school, right, which was in the 90s, I started going out with this girl from like a couple of towns over, whatever, and one of her friends was openly gay at school. Openly gay.
What age?
About 15, 16. No, sorry, it's a bit older than that. So about 18, 19, something like that.
Yeah, that's about as early as we got back home. That was otherwise. It was very brave.
At the time, for that blew my mind. Because there's not because I was opposed to it, but because they'd have been beaten to death in the village where I lived. Yeah. And that confidence and the acceptance of being themselves. Yeah, I thought there was a lad at our school who came out, but he didn't come out until after sixth form. So again, that's actually a similar age and stuff like that. I was so proud of him because the environment that we lived in, that was the most rebellious thing that you could have.
Exactly. Rebellious.
Absolutely. I used to get chased through the fucking village, right, because I had green hair, by grown men who wanted to kick the shit out of me.
Grown men.
Oh yeah.
I had fellow kids who didn't like me for being a goth, but I mean, they were just being bitches.
No, this is when I was a teenager.
They were kind of scared of me as well, which is good.
Mate, honestly, I live in an old mining town that is not as cosmopolitan as it might be.
Not very punk rock by the sounds of things.
No, it's incredibly not very punk rock.
No.
But again, because of my environment, these things blew my mind, and I was totally open to all these things. I was no way homophobic, in no way racist, in no way transphobic or any of these things.
No.
But at the same time, I'd not been exposed to any of these things.
Yeah.
So people in my environment who were less progressively minded to me, who also had not been exposed to these things, you can kind of understand why they're terrified of it, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not justifiably, but you can understand their mindset, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, how do you get people out of that? I suppose by sort of trying to sort of counter the indoctrination by showing them reality, I suppose, is the best
I tell you what, that's a good note for me to segue in, because this is something that I've thought about a lot. I think it's something like Daniel Morrison's work, which is one of the things he's written a few Medium articles. We've talked a lot, we had him on the show a few times, basically talking about the this whole idea of this sort of like these more right-wing fossil fuel, like you say, interest think tank elites and these sort of things. Yeah. So let's go down to the basics. A lot of the people are, whether they were or are, addicted to counter narratives. This is the thing. So a lot of these people weren't, but are now, or they were already sort of opposition defiant disorder types who eventually got convinced by people like Milo Yiannopoulos that being conservative is somehow punk rock.
Yes.
And they have gone down this path, and they've followed a narrative, they've followed a general sort of stereotype, and that's fine.
Yep.
But when it comes down to it, the reality is that they are being programmed by a fairly small and yet very large group of people who are either directly funding media organizations that have large reach, as they are funding that, or they are just basically, like I say, the downline of these organizations that are parroting these talking points because they get viewers. Partially, like I say, with that unintentional effect of Roger Ailes, where you think that what you're doing is you just kind of get viewers, but by the fact of this bizarre sort of serendipitous reaction to hatred, bigotry, persecution complexes, and a general sense of superiority of like one to the other, that it's very successful in getting viewers and attracting passion, which creates shares, which creates sort of viewers. So these counter narratives are very difficult to contain once they're out of the stable. So you have these right-wing counter narratives, which are being fostered and funded by large right-wing interests, and also bit players who are basically getting people to give them money because it makes them feel interesting.
Yes.
What you do is you give a different counter narrative, because you can't give these people, and I love the idea of being able to bring them around to a more mainstream sort of perspective, to basically say, look, we live in a society. Shut the fuck up. Like, just be one of us. Be one of the community. Why can't you just be part of the thing? Yeah. Or you can provide the other counter narrative, which is that the elites are programming you fucking dead shit. And you are a useful idiot for fossil fuel industries that are going to cause your grandchildren to die.
Yeah.
That's a counter narrative.
And that's the truth. And that's what's so
it is the truth.
Galling to me, because you can see that with climate change, you can see it with Brexit, you can see it with the election of Trump, and you can see it with COVID denial. You're pawns. You're part of a mind control program. Now, here's the problem, right, Kate? Right? When you get into the conspiracy world, there is that entry into it where you go, I can't believe how fucking stupid I was for all these years.
I was blind. Okay. I was a sheep. Yeah.
But the problem is with that, people are like, it's okay. It's okay. You're right. You know that now. Yeah. The problem is that because of the framing of it nowadays, you can't say it's. I don't know. It's almost like the talons are in too deep or whatever.
They're very deep. They're
because
very,
the problem
very deep.
is, in the same way that where you've got to reject the thing, your worldview, and go, oh crikey, I was wrong. With this, you've got to go, I was wrong again.
Exactly. Yeah. True.
Right. I was wrong again, and so you've got to give somebody the sort of the framework to understand why they were wrong. That doesn't make them look stupid.
The only way you can do it, though, is, of course, in the fact that if you make them come around to a mainstream consensus where you realize everything is wrong, but you have no payout, then it's like the poker machine that basically just says, here's your money back, go home and forget anything happened. Whereas this one has the payoff of basically saying, you were wrong, but you wound up being right again. Don't worry, you're still magical, you're still brilliant, and you're still raging against a machine, which gives you a sense of purpose.
No, absolutely. The problem is that basically, like the sort of psychological comfort built up by the thing, because it's so entrenched with sort of politics, and because
too entrenched at this point.
Because
they have communities now.
Yeah, precisely.
It's their only friends.
Yeah, like in the past, you could say basically, you know what, I've looked at this 9/11 stuff and I'm not convinced that there was no planes, say. And people would go, all right, no worries. We'll still keep looking into this. You look into your thing. We're all still pals. Yeah, okay. Yeah. There are certain lines now where basically it's, you know what, I don't think that we should be hating trans people. Well, then get the fuck out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be very subtle.
Yeah, yeah.
Really subtle.
There is... and again, it's that shift. The whole movement shifted to the right. I mean, again, the microcosm of it is looking at is Alex Jones's content or David Icke's content and stuff like that. There was always the anti-Semitism and the sort of, But again, even when it was the anti-Semitism, it was couched in. It's not really anti-Semitism. It's just that these people happen to be Jews, kind of. Like, do you know what I mean?
The common enemy thing is huge as well.
Yeah. That was a bit of a revelation for me, actually, as well. Was at a point where I sort of looked at it and went, yeah, there's a fuck ton of anti-Semitism. Like, but most of the people don't realise that they're being anti-Semitic. Like, the canards. Like, 9 times out of 10, it used to be the fact that people were talking about, say, Rothschild banking and stuff like that. They didn't actually hate Jews or anything. They just had heard this trope. And so basically, like, they're talking about that and they don't realise that it's Nazi propaganda.
I don't like finances. I think bankers are assholes. I've heard about the Rothschilds. I'm adding this up like a child.
Yeah, but nowadays it's kind of it's a bit more extreme than that, and basically there's a lot more sort of dog whistles and sort of
Oh, it's much more complex.
and just out and
And
out
considered.
sort of claxons as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
but
totally.
but there's definitely there's people in the movement who are anti-Semitic, quite proud of it, and doing their best to make sure that sort of spreads. And like we mentioned Europe before, like I say, I love mentioning it, but the 12-hour Holocaust denial film,
Shite. Yeah.
it's
Oh,
all
yeah.
through the movement, and it's that thing of like, I'm sorry, like, why are you sharing this? Why is this moment of awakening so important to you that you would cheapen the death of so many people? It's ridiculous. Like, no one's out there denying the Pol Pot in Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge killing
Yeah.
2 odd million people with fucking glasses,
Yeah.
or Stalin's terrible of work there. I mean, like, it just so happens the one that concerns the Jews is the contentious one.
Again, that's an interesting one, though. The Holocaust denial. Have you read the Deborah Lipstadt book, Denying the Holocaust?
No.
It's fantastic. She's the woman that took David Irving to court, or David Irving actually took her to court.
Oh, wow. Okay. And backfired?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Fucking
she called him a Holocaust denier. He took her to court to sue her. He ended up losing and paying her expenses, I believe.
Good.
Yeah. He's a dickhead like David Irving. Although ironically, here's one of the things, right? Okay. And this is I hate to sound like a snob or anything like this, but people don't deal with information well. People don't know how to decode information. A lot of people don't understand like certain rules of media, which is bizarre because you can kind of read it on the television news, but then in print media and other things, that like people are very selective. If there is a question mark in the headline, does COVID vaccine cause death? ? You know the answer. The answer is no.
Yeah.
Because if the answer was yes, there would be no question
they would have
mark.
a question mark. Exactly.
They put the question mark there so that they can say any wild shit. But most people don't sort of like get that. Most people don't know how to write an essay and how to frame. I helped my lad's mate with his dissertation, and he did really well in it. But basically, like when I was reading it and stuff, I was like, right, you've got to explain why you think this. You can't just say this. You've got to explain what evidence made you think that and why you think that evidence is good. And then you've got to compare the opposite argument and look at the evidence there and then weigh it up and see which is right. You need 4 points for, 4 points for against, and you need to show you're working. It's no good just saying this is a thing or I think this. Why is this a thing? Why do you think this? What evidence has led you down that path? Right, okay. And even he, who was at like university level doing his final thing, he'd not really done that type of essay before. So I had to help him do it. Now, going back to the Deborah Lipstadt book on denying the Holocaust, why it's so good is it because it looks at sources and it looks at timelines. And this is so basically when it says, oh, there was a swimming pool at Auschwitz or whatever. Okay. So she finds out that, there wasn't. Well, there kind of was. It was a water tank that was used by the guards, right? Okay. So she finds out that, the facts about it, but then what she finds out is, well, who was the first person to say that this was a swimming pool? And what was the evidence that they got for it? And what was their perspective? And in every single occasion, you found out that this was a sort of card-carrying Nazi that was, many, many years after the fact, looking at nitpicking things to say, oh, well, this you pull this and the entire house of cards falls down. And by going and finding the source of the information, where it came from and why it was disseminated, you get a further understanding. So you can go, well, I can dismiss that, or in some cases you can say, well, fine, that's solid. So but a lot of people don't actually have these skills. And like David Irving as well, for all his faults and stuff like that, before he went absolutely mad and started being a Hitler enthusiast, he was an excellent historian. And the reason that he did that was because he had this tactic that I try to use whenever possible, is to put things in a timeline so that you can go, all right, well, what happened? When did this happen? And why did this happen? I recently read a book called Bloodlands, which is a fascinating book about the Second World War. And I don't know if they teach you do the Second World War when you're at school.
Yeah, of course,
right. But so I thought I knew everything about it, or the general gist. And what this book does is it lays out the timeline of why was the Ukraine important? Why was Poland important? Why was Czechoslovakia important? At what point and you find out that things like the Holocaust and the mass gassings and stuff like that happened because of a series of events.
Yes, and they
like,
made
do you
sense.
know what I mean? Like when you sort of learn it at school, you go, all right, so from day one, they invaded Poland because of Lebensraum and started gassing the Jews. And it's like, no, that's not what happened at all. There was a lot more complicated. They'd already tried mass deportations and working people to death. They'd already been shooting people and doing mobile gas things.
Yeah.
There was an ironic stage during the Second World War where, because there were so many German men fighting in Europe, they brought in Jewish prisoners to Germany to fulfill the working roles that the Germans weren't able to do. And so at the start of the Second World War, Jewish population of Germany was like 1% or something like that. And at times there was far greater than that due to the Nazi Party's actions and stuff like that, which then they were able to use to go, look at this and blah, 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 and justify gassings and stuff like that. There was also a thing that I found out that basically after the war, when German civilians were being taken on trains to places away from war zones and stuff like that, they were fearful that they were going to be gassed because they knew about it, which was not a thing that. But the point being that even things where you think, oh, I know how this went down. Yeah, it's never as simple as that. Never as simple. Like, yeah. There was Nazi policies directly influenced Soviet policies. Soviet policies directly influenced Nazi policies. American policies affected both of these people, and just that the world is far more complicated, and motivation is important. And understanding the circumstances that have led towards something, it is important to understand the complex nature of the world. Now, what conspiracy theories tends to do is bypass that and go, there's an overarching reason, there's a world plot, there's an X, Y, Z or whatever. And just to like absolutely 100% clarify, I'm not saying in any way that the Nazis were good or that their actions were justified by circumstance. Sense. Yeah. No, absolutely not. It was horrific, obviously, as was Stalin. But it was just fascinating to hear the way that it all happened and sort of almost the grim inevitability of you can see where this is going. Obviously, with hindsight, you know that this is going to lead to this, which is going to lead to this, which is going to lead to this and stuff like that. For example, I didn't realize like Poland and Belarus where the Einsatzgruppen and stuff had a horrible, terrible time of it. Poland had an awful time from both sides, as did Ukraine. And then essentially a lot of these places were just abandoned after the war as well. So just
economies fall and that sort of thing.
But so my point is that basically even things that you actually think like, oh, I've got a fairly solid grasp on this, like. You often don't, and and
sometimes you don't even need to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's not necessary. But the idea of when you're looking at a situation where neo-Nazis are coming back, Europa becomes a thing in certain movements, and you start thinking, so this person who sells water filters is starting to talk about Holocaust denial. What the fuck do you do about that? Yeah. But what I will do, I'll close out this note here, which is Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter and dumb accident? Is it a calculated move? Is it something that is going to change the world as we know it? Or is it one of those things that's going to last for 2 years and just fuck off? I mean, like, surely he's got to sell at some point, right? I mean, like, the guy's driving into the ground. He's going to
lose so much money. I mean,
all the ads are just dildos. It's just slingshots and sex ads.
Are you getting that as well? I'm getting weapons.
I'm getting weapons and I'm getting singles, like all sorts of like, would you like? And it's like, dude, like I know my like relationship status is not on Twitter, but like I'm not looking for just regardless of
hookups on Twitter.
Where did you get this information from? Because I'm not looking for this. I'm not on Tinder. I'm like it's absurd.
An absolute shit show.
But it's because Twitter, there's nothing going on. There's no ads. There's nothing. It's just the bottom of the barrel.
Let's just do a quick experiment. Actually, I'll just open up my Twitter feed and let's see how long it takes before something horrific happens. Let's have a
All
look.
right, so I'm going
here
to
we
go for you.
Straight away. We've got David Cartland basically saying that oncologists know nothing about cancer.
Okay.
Right, that's an interesting take, okay? And then straight down there, we've got Stu Peters saying that homosexuality is, Zionism is a gay death cult. There we go.
Oh, is it? Oh, good.
Yeah. That's the
I've got
first
Brent
two
Lee,
things.
so that's problematic.
Oh, those are the first two things in my feed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's ridiculous. Like, so Elon Musk, I wouldn't swap places with Elon Musk for all the money that Elon Musk has.
I'd find that hard, but at the same time, I feel what you're saying.
Like, I'll give you an example, right? Okay, I've used this before, Elon Musk to me is like a 55-year-old man who's bought himself a leather jacket and a Harley Davidson that has pitched up outside the local secondary school, revving the engine to impress the hard lads in year 4.
Yeah, I know. And the girls.
Saddest. No, he's not interested in the girls.
No,
that's how sad he is.
But he does
right?
kind of. He is just interested in lads, isn't he? Really?
Yeah, he wants to be a bro. He wants to be a mate. And the problem is, and this is what happens when you actually listen to him talk and stuff like that. He might be very, very intelligent in certain areas and stuff like that. But most things, he's thick as shit. This bloke does not understand how to process some information, and also all these leather jackets that he's wearing. Did you see the leather jacket that he had?
The New York Times interview?
Someone described it. I was going to pinch this, but that one was dreadful. But also the one where he was doing the Cybertruck release, and it looked all right. And then he turned around and he got this hand-painted skeleton with its arms out like this, I think with puppets dangling down or something. And it was like, someone described this, and I wish I'd come up with this because it's funny. He said, Elon Musk has got a real penchant for cool leather jackets, except they're not cool leather jackets. They're the sort of thing that a 14-year-old would think was cool.
Yes,
and I was like, that's spot on. I think he sort of backed himself into a corner with buying it because I don't think he wanted it. I think Candice Owens almost conned him into it. It was Candice Owens who was saying you should totally do this, bro. And he did
she was trying to sell him. She was trying to sell him Parler.
Was she?
Because her husband owns a bunch of it.
Oh yes, he does, along with the Mercers and whatnot. He's Bullingdon Club, her husband. Anyway, so I think he kind of did it for the lulz, and then realised it's kind of like one of those things where you put up your hand at an auction. It's like, that's legally binding, mate. Because he desperately tried to get out of it at the last minute, and
he did. He tried to say there were too many bots.
Yeah, which is just not true. Everything that he says on there is just a lie. I don't understand getting Alex Jones back on the platform.
That's very interesting.
Because I get that it will increase traffic, but it won't increase traffic enough to offset the advertisers who will leave.
It won't increase traffic in a good way. It'll increase traffic in a dumb way.
Well, of course. But it's almost as if he's like, I'm all out of ideas. The only thing I can think is get Alex Jones' audience back on.
Or Alex Jones just basically just made him feel like a popular 15-year-old boy for a moment, and he said yes.
Yes, that's entirely plausible too.
I feel like his ego might have a bizarrely large part of this role.
Did you listen to the spaces that he did with Alex talking about Sandy Hook and that?
God, no.
Andrew Tate was on there, and everyone. It was a cavalcade of fuckers. Like, he was so softball with Alex. He's like, so tell me about. And this is the thing as well. He's not a particularly good public speaker, Elon. Like, he gets wrapped up in his own words and goes.
He does. Yeah.
He's asked Alex, so tell me what happened with Sandy Hook. And it's like, why don't you go and look? You're literally on the computer right now.
Yeah.
You can
just
find
Google
out. Alex lied. Alex said, well, what happened was they tried to destroy me, this PR firm out of New York, because I was telling the truth. So they took a load of stuff from 5 years ago that they took out of context and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not what happened at all, you lying fat shit.
No, but that's what he does.
But Elon just immediately went, all right, fair enough. Brilliant. Okay. What does Tristan Tate think about this? It's my Christ.
He's a fucking idiot.
He is a fucking idiot, and it's like, and he's a tragedy as well. Like, he's an absolute fucking.
His legacy is dog shit. He was a genius, and now he's not.
Yeah. I keep telling me
He was before he bought Twitter. Genius. Now he's not.
Yeah. Well, because he had a good PR firm. Because nobody had actually listened to him.
He had a good run.
Yeah,
he had a good run.
Like,
Look, it
he
doesn't
opened
matter.
his mouth and people realised what he was really like. He's an idiot.
He was famously well regarded, and now he's famously a part of the problem.
What was it
That's
he said
upsetting.
the other day? I keep trying to encourage my mate to troll him. He said something the other day. What was it? It was totally ridiculous or whatever. And I'm
sure he did many times.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm trying to think specifically what it was. I keep saying to my mate, just keep going on there and go, this is why Amber Heard left you.
Yeah. Well, apparently she abused him. Who knows?
Did she?
The guys are. Yeah, I've heard all sorts of
She
stories.
She looks a bit like one of those a bit punchy.
She does seem quite terrifying, but at the same time, look, Elon probably deserved it. Look,
Christ.
It was very good having you on. I've got a deadline, and I tell you what, man, this has been long overdue, and it's been good because when it comes down to it, I just love a good lefty conspiracy rant.
Oh yeah. Yeah, can't go wrong.
It's so important. It's so lacking in the space because I think that a lot of sort of the conspiracy, or at least like sort of the conspiracy watching space, doesn't have enough politics. I think we need to be more raids against the machine in this space because when it comes down to it, we are watching this space. We are also doing it through a very sort of like, for a lack of a better term, anti-fascist lens, where we just want to be like, okay, look, we are looking at all of this absurdity, but we also just want to remind you that capitalism is probably bad.
Yes.
Let's chat that out as well. And that doesn't get enough airtime. So I wanted to bring this one up because I figured that you were the perfect person to just be like, you know what? Let's do this, but let's just keep the whole capitalism is bad part front and center, which I think we did.
Yeah, totally.
I think we pulled that off.
No, absolutely. Capitalism is a terrible, terrible system, and for everybody that basically doesn't understand it, it is based on inequality.
It promotes evil.
It promotes evil very much so. You cannot have the haves without having the have-nots.
The have-nots have to work for the haves. It's simple as that.
They define each other. So when you you see things like people starving to death and mass homelessness and insurance costs going through the roof and people going, capitalism's failed. It's like, no.
Capitalism is succeeding. This
is what success looks like from a capitalist perspective. Now,
a rising tide lifts some boats, not all boats. Some boats.
That doesn't mean that we get rid of all personal property and eat only octopus from now on.
Absolutely not.
It just means that basically we recognise this, and maybe we have a society whereby we have a safety net to ensure that people don't fall off the back end of it, essentially.
Yeah, and we curtail some mechanisms.
I'd say
make this go out of control.
I don't want to come across as a massive radical, but I'd say basically free healthcare, free education, free police, free fire. And councils and governments that actually do what they're supposed to do, which is keep the streets clean, make sure the bins are emptied, make sure that the Christmas decorations are up, and when some sort of crisis happens, be there to help people. Don't be there to make money. Don't be there to impose authority. Be there to be the purpose of what you're actually set up to do.
And all the people doing that are paid well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Simple. We're all
good.
It'll all be fine. I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I really, really enjoyed this chat, and it has been a very good time. Do you want to plug something? I mean, you got your podcast, obviously. You got your blog, obviously.
That's us at the minute. Someday I call it Conspiracy. Please check us out. And if people want to chat to me, I'm on Twitter or I'm on Facebook, or I've got a website called neilsandersmindcontrol.com where you can email me through that and stuff like that. So, but no, I love this, Joel. Anytime, mate.
Yeah, look, I reckon this is part one of several. Let's do it again.
Definitely.
Cheers, mate. See you later.
All right, cool.
I don't think I ever want to talk to any of those people.
Fuck me, you guys are bastards.